States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, can you please call the first item?
Approve the minutes of the regular meeting of June 11th, 2024.
Are there any corrections or comments? I see none. I move that we approve the regular meeting minutes for June 11th, 2024.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
We have awards and proclamations. Today's proclamation is Amateur Radio Week.
Good morning. Can we please have the individuals with Amateur Radio Week please come forward at this time? The proclamation reads, the City of Wichita, Kansas, founded in 1870, whereas amateur radio operators are celebrating over a century of the miracle of the human voice broadcast over airwaves. Since 1932, the Wichita Amateur Radio Club and amateur radio operators have also provided countless hours of community service, both in emergencies and to other local organizations. Amateur radio provides resources in support of STEM curriculum. The City of Wichita recognizes and appreciates the diligence of these hams who also serve as weather spotters in the Sky Warm program of the U.S. Government Weather Bureau. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Lily Wu, Mayor of the City of Wichita, Kansas, along with the Wichita City Council, do hereby proclaim June 19th through the 25th as Amateur Radio Week in the City of Wichita, and encourage all citizens to acknowledge the importance of amateur radio and their operators in their field day exercise, and encourage everyone to join members of the Wichita Amateur Radio Club in celebrating Amateur Radio Field Day.
Short and sweet. On behalf of the amateur radio community, this proclamation says it all. These are volunteers who have your back in ways that you don't even realize. They're really good people, and they do it just out of the goodness of their hearts. So if you get a chance to learn more about ham radio, we've got excellent clubs in this area, and definitely appreciate the recognition. Make sure they get it.
Thank you for the proclamations. Madam Clerk, please Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Vincent, I'm a little disappointed. I wanted to hear it in radio speak, so next time you accept the award, I expect some breaker or over or. I'll look that up later and see what my reply will be to that.
Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Scott Ledy, hazing in the fire department.
Is Scott Ledy here? I don't see Scott. We also received that Twila Puritty is not able to attend today. Madam Clerk, please call the third item.
William Whittaker, homeless issues.
Is William Whittaker here? I don't see William. Madam Clerk, please call the fourth individual.
Our fourth speaker canceled, Mayor, so we are on consent agenda items 1 through 22.
Do we have any items to be pulled?
Madam Mayor, I would like to pull item 2-18.
Any other items? I see none. Will a motion to approve all the items except for item number 18?
I move that we accept all consent items with the exception of item 18.
Second. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Councilmember Glasscock.
Thank you, Mayor. Yesterday evening, I received about 10 emails in opposition to this project. Given that it's on the consent agenda item and I was just informed of opposition, I'm motioning that we table this item until the July 2nd meeting.
Second. Motion and a second. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Board of Bids and Contracts dated June 17th, 2024.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council, Josh Lauber, Department of Finance. The Board of Bids and Contracts convened for June 17, 2024 with the following items. For engineering, we have water distribution system, stormwater drain, sanitary sewer, and paving to serve Mac Meridian Addition for Mies Construction Incorporated in an aggregate bid total of $552,523.06, subject to your approval of a new engineer's estimate and budget authorization. We have the stormwater drain 396 for Greenbrier Box Storm Sewer Repair for Mies Construction Incorporated in the amount of $233,500. We have North Market Water Main Replacement for Mies Construction Incorporated in the amount of $2,425,133. We have the Outsourced Paving Preservation Program Joint and Crack Seal Phase 1 for Innovative Road Composites LLC, DBA Super Sealing USA, in the amount of $180,000 awarded to the engineer's estimate. We have the Outsourced Paving Preservation Program Joint and Crack Seal Phase 2 for Conspec Incorporated, DBA Kansas Paving, in the amount of $215,000 awarded to the engineer's estimate. We have the roof replacement for South Sewage Treatment Administration Building for Buckley Roofing Company Incorporated in the amount of $68,650. We have the Fortress Muscle Control System Ion Chamber Anodes for ONG Consulting LLC in the amount of $129,251.08. We have the ultraviolet light replacement bulbs and parts for sewage treatment for Trojan Technologies Group ULC for an amount not to exceed $180,000 per year, requesting a 1 year with 4 1-year options to renew. We have for Airport 3 multitasking snow removal equipment for MB Companies Incorporated for an aggregate bid total of $3,058,071. We have one 2024 Caterpillar 420-071T backhoe for Foley Equipment Company in the amount of $142,985. And we have the Federal Aviation Administration support for relocation of National Airspace System facilities for Federal Aviation Administration in the amount of $53,112.35. This is how to become a vendor with the city. These are open requests for proposals out on the street today. And I'd be happy to try to answer your questions and recommend your approval.
Any questions for staff? I see none. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Charter ordinance and resolution naming city website as official newspaper.
Good morning. I'm Sharon Dickraff, City Law Department. We're here today to discuss the charter ordinance regarding the designation of the city's official newspaper. Maybe. Went too far. Background, as you may recall, on April the 2nd of this year, the City Council initially reviewed this item. It was deferred for staff to do a couple different things, establish an online retention policy, formalize the website search options, and make presentations to all the DABs. Presentations were ultimately made to all the DABs at their June meeting. DAB comments, general comments were that DABs 1 and 6 were generally opposed to the proposed changes, citing generally that they felt the changes would not promote transparency and concerns that not all individuals have readily available access to internet services. DABs 2, 3, 4, and 5 were generally supportive of the proposed changes. State statute requires cities to designate by resolution a newspaper as the official city newspaper for the publications of ordinances, resolutions, and city notifications. State statutes and city ordinances require that certain actions be published in a newspaper or its official newspaper, and a list of statutes requiring publication in the official city newspaper is attached to the agenda report. Currently, the Wichita Eagle is designated as the city's official newspaper. We have contracted with them since 2019. Approximately $120,000 is spent each year on legal publications. This contract is to remain in effect until August of 2024, when it will be rebid. As far as publication requirements for print requirements, the state statute does have a number of requirements. If a print version is chosen as the official newspaper, it has to be published at least weekly, 50 times a year, must have been in effect 1 year prior to the publications. The publication needs to be considered a periodical for the U.S. Postal Service and has a general circulation in the county where the city is located. Must not be a trade, religious, or fraternal publication, and it has to be published within Sedgwick County. The proposed charter ordinance allows the city to designate by resolution the City of Wichita's website as the official newspaper. Charter ordinance must be approved by at least 5 votes. The resolution is not in effect until 61 days following publication. It allows a period of time for citizens to initiate a protest petition if they were so required. The resolution designating the city's website as the official newspaper requires the website to be made available to citizens at no cost. The clerk will also execute an affidavit verifying that the document was properly published. Paper copies not to exceed 20 years must be provided to citizens on no cost, and notices will be maintained for a minimum of 5 years online. The resolution does not change the requirements that the city clerk essentially keep these types of notifications indefinitely or as required by state statute. I'm going to turn it over to Tyler at this point of the communications team, who will talk about changes to the city's website.
Good morning, Mayor, members of the Council. Tyler Schiffelbein, City of Wichita Communications. Just want to clear up some misinformation that was out there. Our website was never actually down. It's hosted through a third party, Civic Plus, so the website was never down. There were applications through our website that were down, but the website itself never went down. And from the beginning, we were telling people to go to wichita.gov/alert to get updates. So legal notices, you can get direct access from our homepage under the government or how do I tabs. There's also a little icon there on the very front that you see first thing to get legal notices. It's in the website footer. You can search it. It's in the archive center, and it's also on the city clerk's page. So who has access to the files? One thing was talking about people being able to alter files, that sort of thing. Only the city clerk and deputy city clerk have access to ordinances and resolutions. No one else can get into those files except for those two, and our 3 system website administrators. They have to be able to have access to everything, but they usually are out of that. So it's just the city clerk, deputy city clerk. And then there are other notices out there by department, relevant department staff have access to whatever notices they are publishing. Print copies are available upon request at all the Wichita Public Library locations and the neighborhood resource centers. So we were also asked to come up with strategy, to target people and get more information out there about notices. So who's our target audience? All Wichita residents, people who are impacted, businesses, community organizations, neighborhood organizations. So we have updates on wichita.gov. We're going to be sending out quarterly, I believe, links to notices in our newsletters. We're going to continue our monthly social media push, and we're going to look at community partnerships as well to find those audiences that this may be direct impact. And then we're also looking at a broader marketing campaign to sign up for notifications. We didn't think it was best to spend paid dollars on just legal notices, but we can push information out there to sign up for all of our notifications, whether that's news releases, calendar invites, that sort of thing. So we'll push people to sign up for notifications, legal notices being one of those. With our website, we're able to track the analytics on wichita.gov, see who's visiting the site, how much information they're getting, social media, the feedback, that sort of thing. And then community feedback, we have Polco or newsletter surveys, and then just anecdotal feedback. So with that.
The recommended action is that the city council approve the charter ordinance and resolution and authorize all necessary signatures. And both Tyler and I would stand for any questions.
Questions for staff, beginning with Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon and Tyler, for the presentation. Appreciate it very much. Sharon, could you please go back to slide 24? Thank you. So the first bullet says must be published in a weekly at least 50 times a year, correct?
Yes.
So if the city website became the official newspaper, if you will, of the city of Wichita, but we still wanted to have redundancy and ensure transparency by also having another site, such as a print media source, printed copies, and then also on their website, would we still have to have that publication be required to have 50 times a year?
As long as you were not designating that print publication as the official newspaper, you could have a redundant or a secondary source for information and transparency.
And that would open it up for other media outlets, if you will, or news outlets to be able to also be eligible for this work.
Yes, as long as we assured that the city's website was still operating as the official city newspaper, there will still be a secondary class of notifications that have to be published, and those have to be published in a newspaper of general circulation.
Sure.
So you would need to make sure that whatever newspaper is chosen for as the official version for those publications would meet certain requirements. They're not as stringent as these, however.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Sharon, just one quick question. Early on, there were concerns that I heard of folks saying where would we keep the record of these legal notices? And I know that in the ordinance, the city clerk would maintain those, but they had referenced the Wichita Public Library. Would these records also be there as well, not just online?
That is not currently something that we're doing. Staff could be directed. The city clerk by state statute is the official custodian of those records. By designating another depository, I think you run the risk of, are all the pages there? You're also talking a large volume of documents for the library to maintain, but that's a policy issue, not a legal issue.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, because the argument was that there are records of the papers there, but that's a lot of paperwork and not just the legal notices.
Yes, I mean, you would have, the legal notice is In many cases, the legal notice is attached to another document. Sometimes those documents are fairly large. As you know, I like to write ordinances that are long, so you're talking about 39 pages of ordinances for one ordinance. So you're really duplicating the online depository of ordinances as well as what the city clerk has, and then you would have a third depository of documents.
Okay, so this would make it a lot easier just to get directly to the legal notices.
It should.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Sharon, for the presentation. I think we've seen it 3 times now, and it gets more exhilarating every single time, I gotta say. Could you go a little more in depth about the secondary requirements for the additional postings that we have to have?
Not sure I understand the question. By law, we have to have a official city newspaper.
Yeah. I mean, for not for what the state still requires is that we can't opt out of. Could you give me a little background as to what the requirements are for that? Is it still?
Oh, okay. You mean about the secondary group of publications for newspaper of general circulation?
Yes, ma'am.
There are not any set statutory requirements. However, the Attorney General has weighed in that a newspaper of general circulation is one which circulates among all classes, which is not confined to particular class or calling in the community, and the term is generally applied to a newspaper which the general public will resort in order to be informed of the news and intelligence of the day, editorial opinions, and advertisements.
So does that mean that it has to be published and available around the community? Is that more the interpretation there?
There is not a rule as far as number of subscribers or how often it needs to be published. It's really kind of open-ended. However, it needs to be something that's generally available to all citizens in a community.
Okay, appreciate it.
Sharon, one follow-up question to something you mentioned. You said that sometimes you like to write lengthy ordinances, and those are published on a print newspaper, but any additional documents are not on that specific notice, though, correct?
Yes, that's correct. What is published, all that's going to be published is the ordinance itself. Any kind of an agenda report or those kind of things are not normally accompanying that ordinance when it's published in the newspaper.
Thank you. Any further questions for staff? I see none. It is time for public comment. Please state your name, your address, and the district that you reside. Thank you.
Vince Hancock from Delano, Mayor, City Council. I'm in Dalton's district, and there's actually something very important about Dalton's district and our DAB board that I have to speak about. Back in the 1980s, opponents of free market economic theories characterized it as voodoo economics. I'd like to springboard off of that idea for a moment and discuss what could be called dodo economics. To survive in a competitive marketplace, we must learn it's not the big that eat the small, it's the fast that eat the slow. If you fail to adapt a business model to a rapidly changing economic condition, it will result in the extinction of your business. Another good way to kill a media business in Kansas is to get caught lying. It takes some kind of nerve to disguise facts optional, half-truths as an op-ed. This is not what we expect from responsible journalism. It is not right to make innuendos about the motivations of state and local officials without even the pretense of offering to interview them to hear their side of the story. We don't have enough time for a full debunking of the inaccuracies that I've seen, but let's examine a short quote. All DAB meetings in May had to be canceled due to the city's computer crisis. While I also don't purport to be a lawyer, I am a journalist and citizen documenter. On Wednesday, May 8th, 2024, I attended and made the only extant recording of the DAB 4 meeting. I published 6 pages of meeting notes for the Wichita Journalism Collective. I also attended Maggie's DAB just 1 week later. Did those meetings not exist? Does the paper seriously expect us to believe that because their reporters didn't attend the meetings, they were canceled? This is not just about being disingenuous about government transparency or accountability. It's about wasteful government subsidies. Nothing in this proposed ordinance prevents any newspaper or television station or any other media outlet from serving their readers, viewers, and listeners by publishing legal ads in print or online. In fact, an entrepreneurial business could actually add value by creating a new service that would allow their constituents to search through legal ads past the 5-year expiration date. Be a wonderful way to make money. It would serve the public. But face it, if the paper doesn't shape up, it will go the way of the dodo. I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Any other individuals who would like to speak during public comment on this agenda item?
Quite one to follow. Hi, I'm Susie Cunningham. I live in District 6. And I just want to make a few comments and clarify a few facts. False information that was never publicly corrected. The Wichita City Council's assertion that Kansas Press Association provides redundant and accessible free public notices overlooks the fact that KPA's service relies on data from its member newspapers, in this case, the Wichita Eagle. It costs quite a bit for them to be members. Emily Bradbury wrote me an email, and she said that the director of the Kansas Press Association said that without a contract with the Eagle, the city would not qualify for the KPA membership, losing access to this free service. People are really accustomed to using that, and I hate for them to have to go to all these different sources to find different things. Half-truths. I listened to the council when various claims towards distribution numbers were presented, but they omitted the city's website's limited reach. From January to March of 2024, the website only had 181 unique visitors to our city site looking at public notices. Following the Lockbit ransomware attack, the citizens and the loss of citizens' personal information, the security breach has eroded public trust in the city and the city's ability to effectively disseminate public information, including public and legal notices, raising concerns about the reach and reliability of the city's communication channels. The assertion that notices are freely available on the website ignores reality. I saw Council Member Glasscock's demonstration where he held up 2 newspapers that he found at the library. But he neglected to mention that the Wichita Eagle was also available at library branches. When I visited my Evergreen branch right before a DAB meeting, only the Eagle was available. They have a table, they have a couch, they have publications on it. There's all kinds of different nonprofit publications, magazines, that sort of thing. There were 5 copies of the Eagle. When I picked one up, one of the librarians came over and said, and if you come over here, we have all the back issues in date order. So, assuming that sufficient public notice access through these limited circulation, sporadically available papers is misleading and potentially probably inaccurate. On or about April 9th or 11th, Mayor Wu said that you really wanted to make our budget cut decisions data-based. I got an email when I wrote a blanket email to all of you in support, signed by other board members of a group that I'm with. These are just comments that I got back that I think are disingenuous arguments that don't contribute to the database decision-making process. And here's what they said. The Wichita Eagle is antiquated and unreliable. Newspapers should provide public notice publications for free. McClatchy is an out-of-state owner and should not receive taxpayer funds. The intent of these arguments were meant, from my point of view, to defame the Eagle, and I found this assertion to be condescending to me. I know we do business with companies that have headquarters out of state. I know because I've been a subscriber of the Eagle for 20 years. I watch them go online. They've been online for 10 or 15 years that I know of, and I know that they count their numbers of reach in hundreds of thousands, not 181 on one page. I don't know what your total reach is, but I bet it's not what it was before the lock bit assessment. Anyway, that's what I have to say. I just think the way you argued this point was discouraging. Anyway, thank you.
Councilmember Glasscock.
This is a question for staff real fast. It was alleged that our website only has 100 unique visitors between January and March. I don't know, you may not have the exact numbers, but I don't believe that to be accurate from things I've seen.
Yeah, I don't believe that number is accurate. It's in the thousands, but it's not 181 or whatever the number that was quoted.
Thank you.
I'd have to look up the exact.
I appreciate it. That's good enough context.
We'll continue public comment.
My name's Doug Ballard. I live in District 6. I live in Riverside. And what puzzles me is that this is what you choose to work on. You've got so many problems before you. So most of my working career, a big part of my job was buying construction materials for a job that we had. In fact, this building was one of them. So when I changed vendors or started looking for other vendors, there was always a reason for it. So is the Eagle not doing a good job? I mean, they've been doing it a long time. So I'm not sure what you hope to gain by doing what you're doing. I mean, it looks bad to me from a political point. So I just am not sure what you, the responsibility of doing it. You can't do it for nothing. So you're giving staff something else to do that's already been done before you guys were born, all of you. So I'm not sure what the point was and why it rose to the level of this kind of concern. So I would be opposed to it. And I guess we'll see here in a few minutes. So anyway, that's all.
Question for staff. Sharon, can you come up and explain the process regarding ordinances on first read and second read and how they eventually get on a printed newspaper right now as well as on our website? Can you just show us the process?
I can explain what I know, and I may need to defer to Jamie. An ordinance is written, is presented to the council, it has to be published, has to be read twice, and then following the second reading, it's published in the newspaper. And Jamie's shaking her head over there. The ordinance is sent to the newspaper. It contains an OCA number so that we know how to bill it. And then the ordinance is sent. Jamie then goes and verifies that the ordinance is accurate and correct. And then when the billing comes in, we have to verify that the OCA number was correctly billed for the item that was published. Website is much the same process. Once the ordinance becomes official, Jamie or Tyler then download it to the city's site, and that process has been going on for a couple years, that it was directly put onto the site.
Follow-up question for Jamie.
Okay.
Jamie, can you explain how long you've been doing this online? And can you also address, since you double-check the newspaper if it's published correctly, have there been any errors?
So yes, we set up the website for legal notices a couple years ago, about 2-3 years ago. Prior to that, we have always published our ordinances and resolutions online, no matter what. That's just something we've always done. We've always posted those to the website. This time, we just set up another separate website specifically for legal notices. And then to verify the publication is correct, they always send me whenever I send the legal notice to the paper, I get a email back for a check sheet to look through to make sure everything's on there correctly. If I have any changes, I have a deadline to let them know by. And then when I get that affidavit back, I check it again to make sure it was correctly published. Sometimes I'm able to correctly verify that that affidavit. Sometimes I'm not, because the copy they give is not legible. So I just have to ask and trust that it's accurate.
Councilmember Glasscock.
Yeah, I would just like to make one correction from a previous speaker as well. In May of 2024, the total visits to the Wichita.gov website were 157,268. Is that correct, Tyler?
I'm not sure on that number, but she just showed me what I had emailed her previously. She was not talking about the entire website. It was page views for legal notices, and it was like 183 in March and a little less than 100 in both months of January and February.
Okay.
So it was just for that page, not for the entire website.
Thank you, Tyler.
Yep.
Any further public comment? I see none. We'll bring it back to the bench. Vice Mayor Ballard.
Thank you, Mayor. Legal notices are not for community engagement. They are about publishing in an independent record that is maintained in all libraries of Congress for future legal use. The website does not accomplish that, and for that, I'll be voting no.
Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. Thank you to the community members who were here today. Also, thank you to the community members who've reached out. I've had robust discussions regarding both sides of this. Thank you to communications. Thank you to legal. You've been very helpful to me during this process and certainly answered all my questions. I've said consistently since the first time this item was brought to us that I'm not willing to sacrifice transparency for cost savings. I understand that we have looming budget shortfalls in 26, 27, 28, but I also think it is our responsibility to be transparent to the community. I understand that our website was not shut down during the cyber attack, but people thought it was, or they were worried about going to it because then it could somehow impact them. And so I'm not completely comfortable with just having our own website serve as the official newspaper. I think there's maybe a spot of compromise in the middle. And so if the mayor is okay, I would like to have an option. I would like to make an amendment to the resolution itself, and I have the language prepared for that for a motion. If that does pass, and it would require 4 votes and not 5, then we could address the overall ordinance change, which is a charter ordinance change and would require 5 votes. So with that being said, I think there's a spot for us to have compromise. I believe in being fiscally responsible. I believe in transparency. And I also believe that we must think about the free market. And as somebody in the audience mentioned, times indeed are changing. And so with that being said, I would move to amend Section 2 of the resolution and insert the following language after the second sentence. So I'll let everyone get there. So a sentence would be added to say, in addition, a secondary print source shall be utilized to supplement the city's website. What this motion would do would mean that the city's website would be utilized as the official source, but we also have to have another source. So in case we ever did, heaven forbid, have another cyber attack and our website did go down and wasn't functional, we would have redundancy. And it would make sure then that our community who maybe aren't as adept in technology and want a printed version still has that option available. But it will go out for RFP, if you will, and so we then will be utilizing the free market to determine what the best service would be for this. So I feel that this is the best compromise.
Councilmember Glasscock.
I echo everything that Councilman Tuttle says, and so I would be glad to second her motion.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 6-1.
Madam Mayor, with a motion, I would move that the City Council adopt the proposed charter ordinance resolution and exhibits A and B with the amendment presented by Councilman Tuttle.
Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. I will wait until after there's a second for discussion.
Councilmember Tuttle.
I will second, and then if it's okay, make a question/comment. Okay. Thank you. And thank you for the motion. I appreciate it. I just want to point out that what is happening right now, it's complicated. We've been working on this for months. I agree with the speaker. I'm ready for this to come to resolution so that we can move on to the really important work that the city has to do. We're going to have a very heavy topic to discuss regarding drought in our community. So I'm glad to see this come to fruition, which what I think is the best compromise that we could have. So with the resolution change and now with the ordinance that we are going to be voting on, the city's website will be the official newspaper, but we will still have a secondary source. So it will not just be the city's website in isolation. Also, this then will allow other news outlets to be able to see if this is something that they want to be interested in partnering with the city. So I think it kind of checks all of the boxes that I have heard my community members regarding transparency and then also being fiscally responsible. Thank you.
Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of things before we get to the vote here. This whole argument, the whole debate that we've had, a lot of it's centered around our city newspaper, the Wichita Eagle. I think this has been outside the scope of necessarily what we should be looking at on here. The conversation should be about essentially the charter, the resolution, our policy here, as opposed to bringing in a lot of these external discussions. So that's kind of bothered me through the whole course of this. Occasionally, our state legislature gets something right. It's maybe not as often as we would hope, but they do hold our feet to the fire as to what actually qualifies as a newspaper of note. So I do appreciate the changes that we've worked on up here, that you guys have worked on. I think it does help with the transparency issue quite a bit. This is just a little too quick for the need. There's no need to act now on this because if what people say about the future of news is true, we're going to have to face this issue someday, eventually anyways. So with that, I don't think I will be supporting this, but I will say I do appreciate my colleagues' work on this to actually make it more transparent than it was originally proposed.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 5-2. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Amendment to 2024 exempt salary ordinance.
Good morning, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Jonathan Jones with Human Resources Department, and I have for your review today a suggested amendment to the 2024 exempt salary ordinance. A little background on this: on April 23rd of this year, the Department of Labor announced the final rule defining and delimiting the exemptions for executive, administrative, professional, outside sales, and computer employees, which will take effect July 1st, 2024. The final rule updates the minimum exempt salary level to $43,888, meaning all employees in exempt level positions now require a minimum salary of $43,888 by July 1st, 2024. This rule also outlines a scheduled increase to this minimum exempt salary on January 1st, 2025 to $58,656. Analysis of current staff and all exempt level pay ranges shows that all employees are currently making above the minimum salary threshold requirement of $43,888 required by July 1st, 2024. No salary increases for individual employees are needed to bring current staff into compliance by July 1st. However, to ensure that the City of Wichita has a salary amount that is not illegal per the Department of Labor's final ruling, it is recommended that the 1B32 classification's minimum salary range be increased to $43,888 on the exempt salary ordinance. There are no financial impacts to the City of Wichita with this proposed update. So our recommendation is that the City Council place the ordinance with the proposed revision on first reading and authorize the necessary signatures. I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for staff, beginning with Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. So this does not apply to hourly rates at all. This is strictly salary.
Correct.
All right, I'm glad to see that we are already above the
Yes.
recommended minimum here, so appreciate it. Just, this doesn't also have anything to do, we don't have any salaried individuals that are in SEIU?
No, all SEIU represented employees are not exempt.
Okay, all right, well, I appreciate it, thank you.
No problem.
Any further questions for staff? I see none. We'll open it up for public comment. Anyone from the public who would like to speak on this specific item? I see none. We'll bring it back to the bench. I see no further comments from my colleagues. I'll move that we approve the recommended action.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Drought response plan.
Sorry. Good morning, Mayor and Council members. Gary Jansen, Public Works and Utilities. As we are currently in stage 1 of the drought response plan and looking towards stage 2, the item before you this morning is requesting a revision of the drought response plan ordinance that would allow flexibility and activation of the subsequent plan stages and would create the ability to account for progress and changes that we have seen since the inception of the plan in 2013. So just to clarify, our discussion in this item today is not a request to move to stage 2 of the drought response plan. That's something that's been asked considerably since last week. I'll talk about that more as we go through this presentation today. But more so is to make proposed code changes for the authority that resides with the city manager. That's the part that I'll get to at the end, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about in between. I'm going to discuss the drought response plan, where it started, including the impacts for each stage, our conservation efforts over time, and especially those that have been enhanced, and we've seen a lot more things happen over the last 2 years. And then we'll talk about the recommended revisions based on the collective discussion. Right now, we think there's an opportunity for a community-wide adaptive approach to drought response and a focused effort toward continued voluntary conservation, which is so critical at this point. It's been our focus during stage 1. That's our best bet to avoid mandated restrictions, which I don't think any of us want to get to. So some background on the drought response plan. A prolonged drought that began in early 2011 ended with heavy rainfall in the summer of 2013. If we could get one of those right about now, that would help. If any of you were around at the time during that drought, it literally was, almost literally was fixed by one major rain event that we haven't seen since then. But the important part is where it rains, which I'll talk about also too here in a little bit when we start talking about Cheney. During that time, city staff presented drought response options in numerous meetings with the city council, district advisory boards, the water utilities advisory community, and community groups. A staged drought response plan was approved by the city council in October of 2013. This drought response plan was developed to accommodate a 1% chance drought, same type of drought that was seen during the Dust Bowl days. And that was based on continued use of the current water treatment plant and other operational aspects and conservation approaches at the time, many of which have changed since that time, especially the fact that we have a new water treatment plant about to come online that really is a game changer in all of this. The drought response plan and ordinance included phased implementation of water reduction strategies over 4 stages, triggered automatically by lake levels at Cheney Reservoir, which is really key to our discussion today. We want to expand that and be able to have other considerations and not just the lake levels at Cheney for moving to subsequent stages. Cheney Reservoir being one of 2 primary water sources for Wichita and the region. I'll stop there and talk about that real quick because there's been some discussion, especially over the last week, about our water sources and where we get our water from. I think all of you know we have 2 primary water sources, including Cheney for surface water and the Equisbeds Aquifer. We are currently utilizing historically about a 50-50 mix. It can kind of vary. We are starting to look at moving towards more groundwater because of the situation at Cheney. I will tell you that the Equisbeds Aquifer, we are fortunate, is a little bit more naturally recharging than some other aquifers. Probably heard about the Ogallala Aquifer in western Kansas, the challenges it's been facing, the stresses as a response to drought conditions, in particular over-appropriation and use over time. We're in a lot better shape. Our Aquifer Storage and Recovery Project, ASR, over time, on top of providing credits that we can utilize for future long-term drought situations, has also kept the Equisbeds Aquifer at a higher level and in better shape long-term. So while the Equisbeds is not immune to drought, it responds better to and reacts better to these conditions. So we're still in good shape with the Equisbeds. We've still got water that we can use there, but we do have 2 primary sources. It is not just Cheney. Using current Cheney Reservoir water levels, Public Works projects future lake conditions based on anticipated inflows and water use. Provisions of the plan reduce water demand and increase protections to manage a water emergency. And again, we have made pretty considerable strides since then that I'll talk about soon. Keeping the current water level triggers provided by the plan will continue to protect Cheney and optimize supplies during drought. However, we do believe that program and system enhancements since approval of the plan call for the need to evaluate more factors than just that level at Cheney for activation of the stages. I know there's a lot of repetitiveness as I go through here, and I apologize for that, but I just want to make sure it's very clear what it is that we're doing in our request to you today. So I want to talk about the drought response triggers that are within the plan. This is entirely based on a 12-month average of the Cheney Conservation Pool. We are currently in stage 1. You see the bottom level is 70%. We're getting pretty close to that number. The actual level of Cheney is below 70%, at this time, but the 12-month average is still above 70%. As we start getting closer to that, we're going to have to start looking at considerations for what happens for possibility moving to stage 2. That's why we're here today. Stage 1 began in January of 2023. I'll talk about that more in just a moment, what we've done since that time. And again, the current levels are hovering around that 69 to 70%. So Drought Response Plan Stage 1, all this information is included in the actual code. This is just a way for to be able to compile it and look at it in a little bit different way. Stage 1 provides for voluntary water conservation, and I'll talk in a moment about what we did for communication with the public and outreach when Stage 1 was activated in January of last year. It also talks about taking advantage of the rebate program to incentivize indoor and outdoor water conservation. That rebate program has been in place for many years now. As we spoke to you earlier this year with the 2024 rebate program, we focused almost entirely on outdoor water usage. That's where we see the most increase in water demand and usage is for outdoor irrigation. It's really where the focus needs to be. What you see on the right side of this table is City of Wichita internal conservation. I'm not going to talk about any of those on these 4 stages because I want to talk about those collectively. The organization has been doing quite a bit for multiple years now in numerous areas. So I kind of want to hit all of that together, what's been being done for internal conservation. We entered Stage 1 again in January of 2023, and I mentioned the rebate program having been in place for some time. So moving on, if and when we were to look at Drought Response Plan Stage 2, which the focus of Stage 2 is all outdoor watering would be prohibited to 1 day a week. The city would be broken up into quadrants. There's no watering on the weekends. There can only be watering in the evening. This would apply to all users except the exemptions, which I'll talk about in just a moment. This includes residential and commercial properties utilizing irrigation for lawn, garden, and landscape areas, basically any outdoor use. We've had that question asked if this is just residential, and it's not. Any businesses, any developments, commercial developments, whatever they might be, they're using outdoor water use primarily for irrigation would be prohibited to 1 day a week. So what that brings with is the need for enforcement. We've talked about that over some time, what that might look like. The code discusses potentially how enforcement might be done through the use of MABCD, Wichita Police Department, Public Works and Utilities staff. As you can imagine, with resources where they currently are, that would be a challenge for us, but it's something that we would need to do. The first thing we would look at, we have approximately 20,000 water customers who are currently have irrigation systems. We know that because of the backflow preventers that they have that are required to be inspected each year. We would look at their use. That's still a big task. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of resources. We can start to compare to their average winter consumption to see what their usage is. Pretty well tell if they're watering 1 day a week or not. But it's something that we would have to plan for looking ahead. I talked to staff with the City of Derby yesterday. They've started to look ahead too because the conditions of these drought response plans apply to everybody. I'll talk about that more in just a moment. So the drought response plan applies to all customers. We're a regional water provider to over 500,000 people. That is 1 in 6 Kansans, the 17% of the population of Kansas. That will apply to everyone. We have wholesale water contracts with 15 different customers, neighboring cities, rural water districts, other customers within the region. Everything that you see here within this plan applies to all of them. We have provided communication to those other customers, those wholesale customers, when we entered Stage 1 of the drought response plan early last year. I sent information to all of them. We have provided rebate information to them. Some of the funding for the rebate program is also utilized by wholesale customers within their communities. So if this happens, they also have to be part of enforcement, which is something that we would have to work through. I want to talk about the exemptions real quick and the penalty. You can see in the upper left, if we go to Stage 2, penalty would be a warning for first incident, $50 for the second, and $100 for third incident and beyond. Exemptions to Stage 2 are food-producing gardens utilizing drip irrigation or hand watering, and businesses that generate their core economic activity from outdoor usage will be exempt. Such businesses include golf courses, car washes, nurseries, sod companies, and others identified by the city manager. Again, something we have to work through. There are some nuances here. This plan, again, was developed 11 years old. As we have looked at this, I think there's some things that we need to consider going forward in the future. We'd have to work with the city manager on and talking about the specifics of businesses. I'll mention car washes real quick because it's something that has come up. We all know that there's a lot of new car washes in the community. They do utilize a recycle filtration system. Their business model won't allow it to be done any other way. So that's what all of them do. That doesn't mean that they're not still using water, but because that is a core part of what they're doing, that's would be considered no different than processing or industrial water for other companies. When it talks about outdoor water usage, when this was developed, it was not considering what would be the new type of car washes at the time. We don't need to get into any further into the weeds on that, but it's something that we could talk about as we go forward, if and when we get to stage 2, which we are trying to avoid. Stage 3 plan would ban all outdoor watering. No exceptions on that for irrigation, whether it's residential, commercial. All of our partner communities, all of the wholesale water customers, everybody would be banned from outdoor water usage as if and when Cheney continues to drop and we consider other factors. The same exemptions that are in effect for stage 2 still apply for stage 3. I did want to mention here, this talks about reduced hours at city-owned fountains. Starting early last year, we shut off all the city fountains. They have stayed off and will stay that way. We hear from the public quite often asking to turn those fountains back on, but those fountains do recycle water. Nearly all of them do. But with our climate conditions, especially with wind and heat, you see a lot of evaporation, you see a lot of water loss if people are getting in those fountains. And so we think it's best, we think it's a good example, plus it's a good water saving measure to keep those fountains off.
1 second, Gary. Vice Mayor Ballard.
Wait till you're done. It was just a quick question about the fountains. Are you talking about the decorative fountains or water fountains or both?
Good clarification, decorative fountains only.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I should have clarified that. Drought response plan, stage 4, last stage. We hope to never see getting to this point. If we do, the penalties increase. First is a warning, second is $250. Third incident is $500 a month, and then flow restrictions would be put in place. All outdoor water usage is banned without exception, and everyone in the community is required to reduce their water usage by 15% below the average winter consumption. You can imagine the effort that would take to make sure that happens. But again, this plan was set in place to deal with a Dust Bowl type drought. If we ever got to this point that Cheney was this low, this would still be necessary measures. One of the reasons, again, why we're here today is to talk about potential changes here to how these are evaluated, because there's some new technology. There's some things in place that we can utilize since the plan was put in place. Hopefully we never get to this, but I wanted you to understand what is there now. Major hospitals and dialysis centers would be exempted from the lowering of their water usage, 15%. I think we can all understand the reason why there. So I wanted to talk about what we did. This is a busy slide. I'm going to explain to you what's on here. For public outreach and communications with the community, when stage 1 was activated in January of 2023, the item on the left is the city council item that approved the water conservation rebate program in 2023. It talks about having entered stage 1 of the drought response plan. There was a lot of media attention to that as a follow-up. In the upper right, you can see a story that was published. There were quite a few of them. Through our communications team, we provided outreach to the media, to the public, everywhere that we could. There was numerous discussions, and there has been since then. Every time we get the opportunity at public meetings, district advisory board meetings, I make a lot of presentations to community groups about our new water treatment plant and the things that we're doing. We always keep that up front and center, that we're in stage 1 of the drought response plan. We need to do all we can to not get to stage 2. Bottom right is direct outreach. I mentioned that we have 20,000 customers with backflow preventers. Those backflow prevention devices have to be inspected annually and rebuilt every 5 years. We send out an annual notice, that's what that is on the bottom right, to everyone that has a backflow preventer. This is residential, commercial, and business customers, all of the above. Everyone received a notice saying that we're in stage 1 of the drought response plan with their notice to make sure that they get certified maintenance of the backflow preventer. If you look in the bottom right there, so it talks about tips for reducing water usage 2 to 3 times a week, things that you can do. Hopefully this has helped, and I think it has. We did the same thing in 2024. Our notice earlier this year in 2024 also mentioned the impacts on Cheney and why we need to continue to keep focused on voluntary conservation. I mentioned Cheney numerous times. One of the things we came to really realize in 2024, especially watching what was happening in the local media and the conversations across the community, is more awareness on what's happening with Cheney and why we've been so focused on Cheney and the impact it has on our drought response. As you can see on the left is the Cheney Lake watershed for the North Fork of the Nenasko River. On the right side is that purple area, that's the reservoir itself. The Cheney watershed basin that feeds the reservoir is over 600,000 acres. You would think that would be a big enough area to keep water in this reservoir, right? The challenge, the problem has been true lack of precipitation in this area. We can talk about conservation efforts all day long, and we need to continue to do that. We are in this situation more so because of lack of precipitation for a long period of time. If you spent time up in this area and you can see the different creeks, there's farm ponds, all of them are dry. So what we were seeing is we're starting to get some rain in the area. Wichita and the surrounding area has seen a reasonable amount of precipitation compared to what we've seen the last 2 years. I spoke to somebody yesterday who's got a farm in Winfield. They said their farm ponds are full for the first time in a long time. If you look back at weather patterns over the last year, it's like there's some shield around this Cheney basin. We're just not getting any rain. One thing I want to mention real quick about Cheney Reservoir itself, I've had several questions in the last week about siltation being an issue and diminishing the capacity of the reservoir. While that is a problem on many reservoirs across the state, it is not with Cheney at this time. That's not a factor. I just wanted to let you know it is lack of precipitation. One more comment on that siltation issue. We have done a really good job of being proactive over the years. City Council has supported funding for programs to protect the integrity of the watershed basin, and those programs are focused on sediment control and keeping that out of the reservoir. Upper right corner is a story that KWCH did last week, focusing on Cheney. We started talking to local meteorologists because what was happening, the first thing I mentioned, the narrative and the story was that, hey, we're getting rain, everything's good. If you look on the Kansas Water Office site, the governor has a map for declaration of drought emergency. It even started to show that things were getting a lot better, but there was not a focus on this one spot. So it's important. We started talking to the meteorologists, asking them to keep the focus on Cheney. Even if it's raining here, we've still got to conserve because it's not raining there. Lake level is currently down 6 feet. If you've been out to Cheney recently, you can see it's pretty stark compared to where it was in the past. It's impacting the use of the reservoir and what's happening there. Best thing we can do is get some rain. So moving on to talking about drought resiliency and conservation, especially those things that have changed that we've done to improve where we're at since 2013. Since 2013, significant strides have been made to improve drought resiliency. Strategic use of raw water supplies also protects the aquifers, aquifer, and sustains the overall supply. And tiered water rates with escalating prices encourage conservation. I think, as you know, currently we have 3 tiers of water rates. Tier 1 is the cheapest cost to everyone. That is based on average winter consumption over 4 months. Tiers 2 and 3 then are triggered based on that average winter consumption. So what it does is to try to disincentivize as much use during the summer months, especially related to irrigation. So as we get to this time of year and folks start using more than a certain level of their average winter consumption, they move into tiers 2 and 3. We are currently evaluating those rates to see if it might make sense to change those, to change when tiers 2 and 3 are activated, to maybe change what those rates are. That's something that's going to take us a little bit more time to evaluate and probably become a discussion of part of the future rates discussion, but we think for the future it needs to be looked at. Additional progress includes adaptive treatment capabilities with the new Wichita Waterworks treatment plant, which I'll come back to in a minute, and initiation of other projects like rehabilitation of the local well field and added ASR recharge capacity. Conservation efforts targeted for the organization and the community have been in place for some time, with robust enhancements implemented in the last few years. I talked about the rebate program, and we think that has been successful. Anything we can do to help save water, especially when it's focused on outdoor use, and a reuse water supply system is in place. We currently have at Plant 2, our main wastewater treatment plant. We send gray water, which is the effluent from the plant, to Spirit under an agreement with them, and where they could use up to 380 million gallons a year of gray water, which would replace potable demand that they previously utilized for their production processes and industrial use. So always looking to the future too for more things like that. We have a better understanding of drought conditions since 2013 with some of the modeling that we can use, some of the technology that's in place. I mentioned the local well field and ASR enhancements. Those are water resources available to use now that did not exist in 2013. That's another factor we want to be able to take into account here when looking at moving on to subsequent steps. Wichita Waterworks, water treatment plant, you hear me talk about this a lot. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but it's really the keystone for drought resiliency in the way we treat and manage our water supply. It provides more flexibility. It provides the ability for us to treat more groundwater. Our current water treatment plant is restricted to the amount of groundwater it can treat. We could get to a point with our new water treatment plant that we could treat 100% groundwater if we needed to at some point in time, which we can't do now. We are working on commissioning and startup plan, perfecting that right now. Our projection right now is to have the new plant online April 1st of next year. That becomes a really big deal and a game changer at that point and how we address drought because of the flexibility provided. All in, looking at this, we have established an annual conservation rate of 0.35%, which has a goal of saving 80 million gallons per year. We have generally exceeded that every single year and want to keep improving on that. So I'm going to keep pushing. Sorry, I know there's a lot of information, but I want to make sure you had all of this at the same time. Our conservation efforts can all be found, generally all found at SaveWichitaWater.com. This is on the city's website. I'll hit on a few highlights here. There's drought update information, which I've already talked about. It talks about Cheney and the levels at Cheney and where we're at. There's irrigation education, which provides links to K-State and Sedgwick County Extension Office reference materials. Talks about how you can save water, watering less, letting your grass grow higher, what that does. There's a lot of focuses in many places here that you don't need to water every single day. Watering your grass once or twice a week during this heat will still keep the lawn alive. May not be as green as some people want it to be, but it makes for a healthier lawn no matter how you look at it. The internal conservation plan is mentioned here. It's the next slide I'm going to talk about and really focus on of what we've done to make a difference. Lawn care, managing supply is what we talked about, the balance between the Equus beds and Cheney, and then our water conservation rebate program. So really good information all in one place. We send people here often, especially those in the community wanting to know what they can do to make a difference. Conservation efforts, especially focused on the internal conservation plan. For some time now, we have had an internal conservation team. There's a representative from every single one of our departments that meets on a regular basis to talk about what can be done, with the organization, through the organization, to help conserve water. I'm going to hit on some highlights here. I'm not going to stop on every single one of these, but I'm happy to come back to it. Reducing water usage on city-owned grass-covered land. An effort has been made, even through contractors, to mow at a higher level, which improves root shade and reduces evaporation. That lowers water usage and also requires less mowing. That is a really big deal when you look at the number of facilities that we've got. Also, in that same vein, I'll give you some quick examples. Wichita PD East Substation is just about to open. The grass that would be placed there is a warm season grass requiring less water. Once it gets established, it doesn't need much water at all. Historically, if you look back in time, most of our facilities would have fescue sod in place, just like you see with a lot of commercial developments. We were stepping completely away from that. The Advanced Learning Library includes warm season grass. The Wichita Waterworks new water treatment plant campus, all of the grass areas will include warm season grasses. Reducing water usage on city-owned golf courses. There are quite a few efforts that are going on right now. I'll give you some examples. At McDonald Golf Course several years ago, the ponds were rebuilt, they were made larger, they were made deeper, so that water can be used, effectively reused for watering that golf course. That's a big deal. If that could be done at more golf courses, it would really help. They've created no-mow areas where there's no watering needed, no mowing done. They're looking to convert to drought-resilient grasses where possible. This is done at various golf courses in different areas where it makes sense, and they're trying to add to that more. They changed the way that carts are washed. You know, that can happen a lot during the day. They're using air hoses to clean them off, primarily wet and dry rags, getting away from using so much water. Clubhouse renovations have been done to install automated fixtures, water bottle fill stations, things like that that we've done on facilities across the community. I mentioned city fountains, decorative fountains being turned off. Splash pads and pools also use a recycling filtration system, and they have sensors that are in place to help with water reduction. The Aquatics Master Plan that was implemented several years ago provided new technology and a lot of good stuff that's really focused on water conservation. Stryker Soccer Complex was a major project to replace all turf grass fields with turf. Needless to say, that's a big savings on water over time with that facility. We looked at using gray water from Herman Hill with the water center to water trees. Logistically, it hasn't been ideal as far as getting people to and from there, but it's something we'll continue to look at. Conservation-minded landscaping guidelines have been applied across all city projects for many years now, looking at xeriscaping, drought-tolerant grasses, anything that we're doing in the medians to make sure that irrigation is not needed. I mentioned park and recreation facilities. With buildings across our organization, we own and maintain over 500 buildings. We've done everything we can to put in low-flow fixtures, automated fixtures, plumbing that uses less water. We're still working on that in many areas. Water reduction has been put in place for vehicle cleaning. Needless to say, we've got a lot of vehicles, so that has changed considerably. For fire hydrant uses and fire training, there's a lot of things we could continue to talk about. Construction projects and testing of new water lines. I can remember when I worked in our construction office, we would build a new water line, and to disinfect that line, you've got to run a certain volume of water through there for a certain period of time. We would have inspectors that would open up that hydrant and let that water blow and go to other projects for a good part of the day and come back because they knew that, hey, we got enough through it, we're good. We are very calculated now and deliberate about utilizing only the amount of water needed to actually disinfect that line. So I just want to provide that as a good example. A lot of stuff there to take in, but I wanted to make sure you knew the things that we're doing, we're continuing to do that are making a difference. We have seen a decrease in internal water usage over the last 2 years as a result of this. It's incremental some months, but it at least is a decrease. We think this is a factor that needs to be considered going forward because we're going to keep moving on all these initiatives. Continued voluntary conservation now, I mentioned this before, can help avoid mandatory conservation and enforcement efforts going forward. So, getting to the point of why we're here, thank you for bearing with me again. The revision to City Code Section 1714. This is what it says: when the 12-month moving average of Cheney's conservation pool level indicates the existence of a drought response stage in accordance with the previous section, what it currently says is the city manager will issue a public declaration as such drought response stage, We would like to change that to say that the city manager shall be empowered to. The next part of that does the same thing for coming out of that and saying that we're no longer in place. The bottom part of it is really the most important. And what it says is that factors that may be considered at the city's manager's discretion, but not all inclusive to the declaration of drought response stage, include the utility's ability to reliably treat and deliver potable water, Cheney Lake levels, the condition of other available water supplies, emerging water demands and weather trends, current conservation efforts, financial impacts, and economic conditions. Pretty much everything we just spoke about. Actions prescribed by the plan are outdated and should be revised in alignment with current conditions. Empowering the manager to assess other critical factors will enable an adaptive approach to implementing the drought measures and water management. There is no current cost to adopting the code revision if the drought continues and the response plan restrictions are enacted. If we move to subsequent stages, revenue reduction will occur. What I talked about with tiers 2 and 3 is a considerable part of our revenue. That's something we are looking at, looking forward to. When our rate plans are developed, we try to include some contingencies in case we get to this point. We were looking ahead of what needs to happen in case we get to this point to help accommodate that revenue loss. Last thing we want to do is have to, consider emergency rate hike, and that's something that we've had questions about from the public. With all of that, staff recommends the City Council approve the code changes, place the ordinance on first reading, and authorize the necessary signatures. Assuming your approval today, we would continue to monitor Cheney and all other water sources, water use, and continued conservation efforts, keeping you and the public informed along the way. I might mention one last time, just to be very clear, we are not requesting that we move to stage 2 today. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for staff, beginning with Councilmember Glassman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First off, this is the most important thing we do in the community, more than anything else, is conserve our water. And I'm thankful for everything that we're doing proactively as well. I don't think any of us up here are water experts, as Councilman Tuttle says. You all are. The quick question I have, just for like a historical nature, have we ever entered into, and it may have been called something different of stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, have we ever implemented, let's say, a stage 2, stage 3 restrictions completely?
Not since this plan has been in place in 2013. I hear stories from others about water rationing in the future. In my 29-year career with the city, I'm not aware of it, but I may not have been paying attention. But I don't believe we've gotten to stage 2 for quite some time.
I know a lot of communities, especially in the western states, are experiencing probably even more severe droughts than we are as well. Have a lot of communities moved to the same stipulations or requirements that we're asking if we move to stage 2 or stage 3? Are they already in those stages themselves?
I think so, and if you even look at the western parts of our state, you probably would see a lot more severe restrictions. Talking about the southwestern part of the country, I mentioned reuse in the gray water. Many communities are having to rely on that as almost their only water source, which is still a good and innovative use, but there are challenges with the public wanting to reuse water as a potable source, as you can imagine.
Thank you. And one last question, because I know the board is full too. I know some of our landscaping, some individual homes have wells versus city water. Would we still be encouraging the same behavior? Does that help the system as a whole?
It does. When you look at, so if you kind of look up at the makeup and the geology of the community, you see a lot more wells on the west side of the community for a lot of reasons. You don't see as many on the east side, just because, again, the geology and the makeup and the availability of groundwater. But those wells in and of themselves, residential wells, don't have a large impact. None of these restrictions apply to those that have wells. However, we still would consider conservation from all. At some point in time, it's all coming from the same place. When you talk about groundwater, even though it may not directly be from the Equus beds, it does make a difference. So our conservation message is for everyone.
Thank you.
Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary, for your presentation and for your staff and your team and all that you're doing every day, but especially we have enough challenges, getting the new water treatment plant up and running and then now adding this in. So certainly appreciate your efforts. Just one quick comment and then some questions. I do want to say slide 55 was the slide that talked about what the city is doing. And I just could not be more impressed to see that really comprehensive list and things that I would have never, ever thought of. So kudos to you and your team for that, for sure. I asked this on Friday during agenda review, but for those who, weren't tuned in, what are we doing to ask the community for help in terms of conservation? Are we communicating with the HOAs? Are we communicating with business and industry? And then the second part of this question, and then I have one other question, but if one of our anchor industries or other large entities that use water want to try and conserve more, how can we help them do that? So how are we communicating with our neighbors about the conservation plan and what they can do, and then how are we helping them?
So thank you, Councilmember. And I do agree on our internal conservation efforts. I know I talked about a lot of things here, but I could spend a lot more time talking to you about what we've done. And again, all this information is available on our website. Communication to the community has become so critical. And we've done everything we can, especially since entering stage 1 of last year, working with our communications team. We've made sure when staff was out in the public to keep this message out front. I mentioned that each year when we sent out notices on the backflow preventers, it talked then about reminder, we're in this situation, do everything you can to conserve water. So that gets out to the 20,000 directly. We can and have put notes in the water bills. That would be to all 150,000 customers, reminding them of the situation that we're in and encouraging conservation. This often, we will come back to this information at the mayor's weekly press conferences often to talk about, don't forget, we're still in a drought. I talked about that we have reached out to local meteorologists, I think is a big deal. A lot of people rely on them and watch local weather, and to hear them talk about we're not out of this situation, you need to keep conserving has been a big deal. It's going to continue to be our focus going forward, even if we get that huge rain event next week that takes us out of this situation like it did in 2013. We're going to continue this going forward, everything that we're doing, because we need to, because you never know when we're going to come back to this. You mentioned HOAs, which I do want to talk about real quick. There's a challenge with homeowners, associations, and their covenants. What's applied under covenants with HOAs is subject to state law and typically not to local ordinance. So we have heard from many folks that live in an HOA that has covenants that says, what do? I'm being told I have to keep my grass as green as you can possibly be, and so to do that I've got to water every day, or I'm going to potentially face fines or whatever it might be from the HOA. We started reaching out to HOA management companies last year. HOA management here in Wichita oversees 200 or more homeowners associations, so it was nice to talk directly to them. They understand the challenges that we're facing. They started talking to their HOAs. We talked to some directly. So far, our conversations have been positive. I think everybody understands the concerns. They want to start looking at their requirements to see if they can change. We probably haven't gotten as far on that as I would like to, but it's something that we're going to keep focusing on, especially as we get closer and closer to stage 2. That's a big deal. You heard me talk about, we see the largest increase in water usage is from summertime irrigation. It just is. And so if we can work through the HOAs, which cover a lot of our citizens and outdoor water use, to be able, I mentioned before, if we could get everybody in the communities to go to watering 2 to 3 times a week, as opposed to watering every single day, it would have a huge impact on where we are at currently with water usage, impact on Cheney, impact overall. HOAs we're going to keep working on, messaging we're going to keep working on. I think I covered everything.
You did. I have one more question then.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And Gary and I had a chance on Friday to go meet with the mayor of a neighboring city who purchases water from Wichita, and they were extremely concerned about this issue and interested in learning more about what they could do and what we are doing. And I did this morning also on a local news outlet, they said that we're going into phase 2, right? So the misconception is out there. And I know on slide 56, you gave us a really good, overview, but you're a champ at this, Gary. If you had to explain this to your neighbor, you're going to get the mail this afternoon and you're both at the mailbox at the same time, and they said, hey, what'd you cover today at City Hall? How would you explain this in the most easiest way for every community member? Like, what's our talking points when people say, are we going into phase 2? What are we doing today?
I think the message that I would keep up front and center is that voluntary conservation is so important to what we're doing right now. And this is a collective effort. It's an opportunity to be adaptive to this. If everyone buys in to voluntary conservation, we can avoid going to mandatory restrictions because we're getting ever closer to that. That's something I spent a lot of time talking to the manager about. We're trying to keep the messaging out there. There's so much information available. I see people in my own neighborhood right now that are watering 2 and 3 times a day. I've spent time over my career looking at problems with pavement, where you get an imperfection in the pavement, and the reason why it got worse is because it's constantly sitting underwater. I've been out to look at streets where the irrigation system was not running in a yard and there's still water pouring out over the curb. That is where we can make a difference. And a lot of that comes from education. There's so much information available on our website. This is not a very succinct answer to what you ask, and I don't know if I would tell my neighbor all of this. But there's a lot of great information out there. That's why we're trying to steer people to that. I talked about K-State and Sedgwick County Extension. They've got great information out there. Not to get any farther into that, but people that water their yards every day and so often, or that's creating a weak root system, it is not good for your yard because those roots never have to go anywhere to find water. So as soon as you start to take that away, it will suffer, and it'll suffer immediately. We encouraged, through discussions with the HOA management companies and these communications with those that have backflow preventers, to start changing now. This year, as you bring your system online, start watering 1, 2, 3 times a week instead of every. We'll see. Like I said, we have seen a decrease in water usage incrementally over the last few months. So hopefully the messaging is making a difference. The biggest deal is we need to stay all on voluntary conservation so that we don't have to go any farther.
Perfect. Thank you, Gary.
Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Gary, letting the grass grow even longer than we have now, I think MABCD is going to be reaching out to you shortly about that. Just a couple questions here. Are the surrounding communities, do they have inspections on the backflow devices as well?
Yes, that applies to, again, all of our users.
Okay, so we will be able to know what houses have those and use the watering systems as well outside of Wichita.
Because of the potential for cross-contamination, you get old water in a system. Nobody wants it coming back into the potable water system. So I think that's required even at the state level.
Okay, yeah, I was just wanting to make sure it's not just our users that we would have that knowledge of, or just Wichita residents, I think.
Correct.
Okay, how much extra gray water do we have, and what else can we use it for? You touched on it a little bit in the presentation, but what are some other ideas as far as using that water source?
Right, I don't know that I can give you an amount of gray water available. So we have 4 currently active wastewater treatment plants. Every single one of them treats a certain capacity of wastewater that's coming through the plant. The effluent then goes to the nearby river, creek, whatever it might be. Plant 3 in northwest Wichita goes to Cowskin Creek. South end, again, our main sewer treatment plant goes into the Big Arc River. So right now, the only gray water use that we have in place is what I talked about for Spirit. Considerable cost goes into implementing those systems. Spirit is, that's their debt service. They're paying for that. It's an agreement we had with them because of the benefit to everybody as a whole. We had, the Councilmember Tuttle talked about the meeting that we had on Friday with the mayor of Andover, and that was to talk about potential gray water to Pterodine Golf Course. Considerable water user. It's a big cost to get there from our 4 Mile Creek treatment plant. It becomes a challenge then to figure out who does that. It's probably not the responsibility of the ratepayers at large. And so we've got to figure out a balance. We've been looking at a plan over there for a couple of years. And the point I want to get to, it's not easy to get to that point, especially from a cost perspective. I mentioned when Councilmember Glasscock asked, there are communities in the southwestern part of the country that have been forced to go to reuse water only because they had no other sources. Everything else is effectively gone. We are continuing to look for opportunities. Right now, it's an expensive proposition for the infrastructure and trying to figure out who might pay for that. But we're keeping it there. We're talking with other communities about what they're doing. We've got staff that are engaged on that level to make sure that we're not missing opportunities. I think our best bet is to find industry that can use that in a proximity to our water treatment plant. We've had requests from different type of industries over the last several years, as you all know, to come to the community. Some are large water users. We have tried to look at seeing if we could position them closer to one of these treatment plants, such that the cost to get infrastructure there was not so prohibitive. So I think that's really where our focus goes, continuing to talk to Spirit as we're already sending them gray water, others that can take that on more so than having to look at a pipe that's 5, 8, 10 miles just to get to one golf course. That may not have been the best answer you were looking for, but there's a lot of moving parts. And I think more than anything, we've got to find a user that we can put in a place that it makes sense.
Okay, I appreciate that. When is the water plant coming online? And then we have a 6-month period before we fully transition from the current water plant to the new water plant? Is that my memory correct?
So our goal right now is for the new plant to be online April 1st of 2025. If we don't make that date, we risk a water usage issue between the plants. So we'll get there. We're perfecting some things related to the commissioning and startup plan now, and I think we'll get there in April. At that point in time, that plant will be producing water. So there will be a period of time when both of our plants are producing water and sending it out to the system. Everything still goes through the Hess pump station, which is near the main water treatment plant now. 6 months is probably pretty close, what we would hope to have everything worked out on the new plant, make sure it's all operational. At that point in time, we would take the old plant offline. Okay. So right now, we'd be looking towards the end of 2025 that we would be providing water to the community from the new plant only.
Okay, because some of the water savings we're looking at here is from the new plant. So those water savings won't necessarily be fully active for another year or so.
Maybe not, but if we got in a worse situation, I think there's some things that we could do to expedite sending more water through the new plant sooner.
Okay. And then the last question is, this is only pertaining to going from phase 1 to phase 2. Does that mean phase 3 and phase 4 are still the hard limits that we're looking at?
Yeah, everything we're talking about here is for all stages, and it's based on these levels. You never know. Again, I talked about the challenges with no precipitation in the Cheney Basin. If that continues, we're going to continue to see the lake levels drop. However, we're doing everything we can on our end to balance the use of the aqueous beds. This continued conservation, overall less usage, is going to help maintain that level, and hopefully we never see those stages 3 or 4, but this will still apply if we get to those levels potentially. And if you were so inclined to approve the requested code changes today, it would not be based just on that level, but all these other factors we talked about.
Okay, so that includes stage 3 and stage 4 then?
Correct. Yes, sir. All stages.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Ballard.
Thank you, Mayor. This is really all overwhelming. Okay, a couple questions.
If it makes you feel better, it is for me too.
That almost makes me feel worse. Can you talk about the new Northwest Water Treatment Plant? So I know I talked to you about, you guys are testing the water now, correct?
So we are at a point, construction is effectively complete. We're doing what's called some functional testing at this time, which is you kind of check all the equipment, make sure everything's working. When you start bringing stuff together and we look at performance testing and running water through the plant, we're not going to be able to start really doing that at any level until later this fall, and for the very reasons that we've talked about. Even if we weren't in these drought conditions right now, to be able to meet the normal summer demands, we don't have a lot of water available to run through this new plant. So our working through final parts and pieces of our commissioning and startup plan, we are very focused on that and when the best time is to start moving. So right now, it probably won't be until November that we start bringing water through the plant for performance testing, and we're doing everything we can, working with Wichita Water Partners to minimize the amount of water needed, but to make sure that we can still confirm that this plant will do everything that we need it to. So there's more to come on that, but that's very front and center for us, recognizing that we're still in this situation. We've got to minimize, but it's something that has to be done, or we're not going to bring this plant online, and everything we talked about today just gets even worse.
Okay. I also received an email about conserving water for people that are watering their grass but on a well. So do you have anything to say or advice or suggestions for that?
And so I think going back to the other question that was asked, these restrictions don't apply to those that are on a well. However, we still would recommend voluntary conservation for everyone. No one needs to water their grass every single day. No one should be watering in the middle of the day. All of these things that we talk about, all of these things that are available from the resources on the website, we would ask for everyone to look at and take that into account. I mentioned before that the wells in Wichita are not going to do a lot to draw down what's in the aqueous beds, but it all plays together at some point, and it makes sense that the conservation across the board needs to be done.
And for what it's worth, he did say that he was on a well, but he thought that he should conserve water as well. So,
and we appreciate that.
Question, are there penalties for any businesses that are like on timers that they're watering the grass when it's raining out, or when it, sorry, quick trip, but when their water's shooting out into the street instead of the grass? Or, is there anything to be done?
On the first part of that, watering when it's raining is a big concern for all of us.
I'm sure they're on a timer, but still.
But even then, the rain sensors are available. Commercial businesses should have them. Homes should have them. That's something that's part of our rebate program. I've got one myself. That's a big deal. Anytime we see that, we try to talk to those if we know about that and encourage them to do that. The part about watering on the sidewalk, that is a violation of city code, and if we hear about that, we will talk to them to make sure it becomes a public safety issue and a potential hazard. But beyond that, as you can see, there's some information in one of the areas that we talk about that concrete does not need water to grow, and so it doesn't make any sense. So we're always trying to keep an eye on those things. I think that's something that can become more of a part of our messaging going forward. But everywhere you look in here, especially they'll talk about rain sensors, the worst thing you can do is be watering when it's raining. I mean, when we look at all of this together, that's something you would hope that we could fix, so we'll keep working on that.
Okay, a couple more questions, and I'll make them quick. On slide 55, do we have any council members or appointments to this internal team that works on these efforts?
We do not. Right now, it is run by my staff and comprised of representatives from every one of our departments.
do you think it would be possible to add a council member or something like that, just so, because I would love to celebrate these things that we're already doing, and I know that we can, through our social media and stuff, but just so maybe there's one of us that's the expert on some of the things that we're doing, maybe I think would be important.
I would see no reason why we couldn't do that.
Okay, and just to be clear, I know you already said this, but if this passes today, it would not affect any of the landscaping or sod companies or anything like that unless we moved into the stage 2, correct?
Well, even at stage 2, they would not be impacted, even into stage 3. So any businesses that utilize water as part of their core activity are still exempt. So if you look at these exemptions, it talks about golf courses, car washes, nurseries, sod companies. I know that's one that you and I talked about. I'll tell you something that we've started to look at in that regard that we'd have to consider. Sod company itself, that's their business, right? They've got to have water to grow the sod and sell the sod. The question we've had from the sod companies is the only way we're going to sell sod is if those people who are buying it, they've got to be allowed to water every single day for 3 weeks to make sure the sod doesn't die. That becomes a challenge. What our message would be to them and needs to be going forward is they need to consider encouraging the use of warm season grasses that take a lot less water and can be established a lot quicker. So that's something that we'll talk to them about. Most of our community is fescue sod, but that's something I think holistically we need to start thinking about. You look at the southwest areas of the country, I know everybody knows this, but you don't see that type of grass because there's no water. You see xeriscape landscaping, you see warm season grasses, you see people that have rock in their yards. Not that we want that, but I think that's some place that we really need to look at and maybe start changing that dynamic going forward. But for now, they are exempt even in stages 2 and 3.
Okay, last 2 questions. I had someone send an email asking if we've been making progress over the last 2 years on voluntary, then why are we suggesting the change?
I think we have been making progress. It's incremental. We haven't seen a drastic change, but if you look historically over the years at water usage, I think we've done a pretty good job of stabilizing the water use, if nothing else, at this point in time. As far as the change, assuming that's asking about the change that we're asking for today, is just simply because we've done a lot since 2013 when this plan was put in place. We don't think it's prudent at this time to use the Cheney water level as the only trigger for moving into mandatory restrictions. We can continue to watch what's happening with conservation. We can watch water use and make sure that we're considering all factors at the same time, everything I've talked about today and not just that one thing. So for those who are concerned about moving to stage 2, to their benefit, this may keep us from going there quite as quick. I can't predict that, but this gives us the opportunity to not just go there automatically once the 12-month running average is below 70%, which we're getting pretty close to.
Okay, awesome. And last question. Okay, I'm going to pick on Bob for a second. On slide 56, where it says factors may be considered at the city manager's discretion, is it just Bob, or is it a group, or is it?
As
That
it
gives
would,
Bob a lot of.
as it would set right now, the recommendation would effectively come from me and from my staff, who spends a lot of time in this area. We've got staff that has been very dedicated to these conservation efforts and everything that's going on, the messaging. We are going to do the best we can to take all of this information and make a recommendation to the manager. By the code is ultimately his decision of whether we move forward or not, but I want to make sure he has everything he needs, all the tools that he needs. I think this really helps the manager weigh a lot of different things, but we're gonna consider all factors and make sure that the best information is there, including trends, where we're at, again, what's happening with water use, what's happening with conservation, and if we can keep pushing forward on that new water treatment plan, it makes a big difference.
Okay, thank you so much.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate the informative presentation. I do hope more of the public pays attention to everything you said. I just had two things on following up on the Vice Mayor, the piece about the manager, the factors being considered. I really like on the website right now, you have one of those things that talks about the current Cheney level, but I wonder if we could add some more of this information to the site. For those people who are paying attention, I think it kind of sets kind of lets them know where we are and what may be coming. And seeing right now it says Cheney Reservoir is at 69%. Like that's something that people would look at, but I think it would also be interesting to see what the emerging water demands are, the weather trends, current conservation efforts, like all of that on that space. I just think that would be a benefit if we could do that.
We certainly can. We're always looking for ways to provide more comprehensive information on savewichitawater.com. On everything you talked about is there. Some of it's embedded in certain places, some of it in others. We'll continue to look at a way to make sure that it all coordinates and works together the best that it can.
Just to clear up, I did not go to that website. This is on the wichita.gov website.
Okay.
On the
Sorry.
job update.
Well, that is within wichita.gov for what it's worth.
Okay.
I know it sounds like a different one, but it takes you to the wichita.gov website. We'll look at that too. I want to make sure that those messages do resonate with each other.
Okay. And then lastly, I know you said the water treatment facility may come online April 1st. Does it have to be April Fool's Day?
We will try to stay away from April 1st. That's a good point. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Councilmember Glasscock.
I just have a few rapid-fire questions based on these comments. So does Derby get their water from us?
They do.
So when they're looking at large-scale potential projects that involve a lot of water, what is our role in that when we're having this conversation?
So I know that question came up before, and I will tell you that I've failed to close the loop on getting more information on that, but I started looking into that, speaking with the city of Derby. Bottom line is that particular development is using some new technology for water conservation and recycling. However, our wholesale water partners, as part of their water sale agreements with us, are required to provide a conservation plan to the city. It doesn't necessarily detail what all that means, but we have the ability to ask, what are you going to do in this regard? What are you going to do to save water? So we are very aware of that and working with them. Going to continue. I don't have all the final answers on that yet, but it's part of what we do. Derby is looking at moving forward with their own water supply at some point, and maybe not utilizing as much from the city, which isn't all bad because that provides more water supply for the entire region and the community, right? But I do appreciate you bringing that up again because it's something that we've got to keep an eye on and make sure. The language within the agreements requires that they provide conservation plans. So nobody that we provide water to can really go out and do something that's just going to waste water. It's something that we would have to be a part of in approving what they ultimately do.
Okay, thank you. I know that your job's not a landscaping expert, but if, let's say, someone is watering their lawn every day now and they're wanting to conserve more water and also maintain their lawn, is there like kind of a phase-out approach? I mean, if they cut cold turkey, I know I'll probably get this question from constituents. If they cut cold turkey and watering their lawn once a week and they've been watering every day, will that have a negative impact on their lawn, or should they maybe start going to 3 days a week and then maybe 2 and then slowly phasing out?
I think a stepped approach based on what I know. We rely on our park department experts a lot and those extension places that I've talked about because they're really the experts. But a stepped approach is really going to be the best. I mentioned before, if you have a lawn that you've watered every single day from the start, it's got a very shallow and weak root system because it doesn't have to go far to look for water. If you cut that drastically, you're probably going to see your yard not just go dormant, but it may die pretty quickly. And so a stepped approach makes a big difference. That was our messaging, has been our messaging each year as systems are being brought back online as they were winterized, they're brought back into service. We have tried to encourage and implore everyone, go to that. Don't water every day. As you come back out of the winter and into the season, start watering less. It's hard to know where we've gotten with that, but that's going to continue to be our message. There's some great resources on our website that would help answer that question, people that they can talk to. But if that's what people have been doing, they're going to struggle if they go from watering every single day to 1 day a week. That's why we've had these conversations, and everyone needs to know what stage 2 means, because that is exactly what would happen if we have to mandate the restrictions of stage 2, regardless of what you've done. You can water 1 day a week.
Start preparing now in case we have to go to that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I see no further questions for staff, so I have a couple of comments. I'll start with, I believe Vice Mayor Ballard just nominated herself for the Internal Conservation Plan Group, and I think that that is a great idea. We have 7 individuals on this board that have our own platforms to communicate with constituents, and I think it's appropriate for us to try to be the ones that communicate the conservation message. And that is something that I think is, when it's based off of data, and right now we're at 69%, is that correct, at Cheney Reservoir?
That's if we're lucky, but it's somewhere around there.
So at 69%, this would automatically trigger if we didn't do this revision.
Just to clarify real quick, Madam Mayor, sorry to jump in. The current water level is less than 70%. The 12-month average, which we need to consider, there's 2 numbers here, not to make it confusing. Current water level is below 70%. The 12-month average is still above 70%. It's necessary to consider that 12-month average because you get seasonal variations. If you happen to get a single event that impacts it, we need to use that. So we're still not quite there with that 12-month average, but we're getting ever closer.
So the website does say currently we're at 71.3%, is that correct?
Correct.
For the 12-month average. So again, it would trigger at 69% if we don't make this change to the ordinance. So just as a reminder, I think that that number needs to be very big and clear for folks, that we really are inching closer, 71.3%. In addition to, I wanted to highlight that the website does have a lot of information, savewichitawater.com, and that does also remind folks that there is a rebate still going on in terms of rain barrels, and unfortunately, a majority of that money is already gone, 72,000 of the 75,000.
Actually, there's
rather the opposite of what I just said.
There's
Not enough people are
Right,
applying
right.
for that. So
You are
I'm trying
correct.
to remind people that there are lots of resources on the website if people read all of the bullet points in here. So I don't know if maybe this is a staff recommendation to communications. If we can have this information more in not just bullet point format, but very clearly stated at the very top, some of this, the 69%, the 71%, the remaining money in the rebate program. These are all things that community members would really appreciate because they're tangible items that they can really grasp. And so if we can challenge communications or task communications to have some sort of plan with this information, it would be helpful.
We will work on that. I'll just mention real quick again, and hopefully I made this clear. One of our biggest challenges has been that Cheney's not here, right? It's miles away, and so anytime it rains here, people figure I'm good. We can keep on doing what we're doing. So I think keeping any information related to Cheney at the top of the page on the front page makes a big difference. That's why it really helped us when the meteorologists started focusing on saying, hey, just because it rained, we're still not in a good spot because of Cheney. So I appreciate that comment.
I see no further questions for staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll open it up for public comment.
My name's Doug Ballard. I live in Riverside, District 6. Most of you weren't here, but back when we were talking about a water plan, I was down here quite a bit. My 8th grade science teacher at Hadley in 1960, before any of you were around, got me interested in climate change and water. And I remember, he said, the war of all wars will be over water. In probably 1993, I was on a committee to talk about the possibility of building a new water plant and conservation. And there were so many business people on the committee that they could not imagine wanting to build a water plant because it would cost like $80 million. We kicked that can down the road for a while, quite a while. One of the things that I was impressed with, and I wished I had saved a copy, was the water usage for the city per address between 1960 and 1990, and it exploded. And I know a lot of this stuff is unrelated, but it really is related. So 50 years ago, we'll say, the turf industry started promoting a grass that should be grown 200 miles north of here. But what it does, it's a grass you have to overwater, over-fertilize, over-mow, collect the grass clippings, pay somebody to haul it to the dump for us. So I wished we hadn't gone down that road. I wished when we started irrigating our yards with treated water, that's drinking water. That's what it's really there for. I wished instead of just putting a backflow preventer on that, we would have also put a separate water meter on it. I think if we had done that, we'd be in shock as to how much water is actually wasted. Because I'm interested in this subject, throughout the United States, there are a lot of cities that are gone through what we're going through right now quite a while back. And the voluntary part of it did not go very well. So you have an industry out there who's planting grass every day that needs to be watered. This is June 18th, and I think it's great, and you obviously put a lot of work, a lot of thought into it. I would leave it the way it is because this is June 18th. You go out to Cheney and you see all that bare dirt and all those facilities that are way away from the water, it'll be a shock. And you can't, once it's gone, you can't say, oh, I wish we'd done something different. You do not want to get to stage 3. We're in trouble if we get to stage 3. And if we get to stage 3, the rest of the state, oh my God. So I would leave it the way it is, and maybe Bob will get a little bit more sleep when we get a little bit closer. I just leave it the way it is. It's great, I think, that you talked about this subject because it is so important. But I think, honestly, I think we're in trouble. I really do. And so I would leave it the way it is, and at some point you can adjust. You may want to move the numbers at some point. There's several things we could do. We could put I put a pressure reducing valve on my house. I wish it was code because I have turned our, because I live in Riverside, most of the time I have about 93 pounds of water pressure. And I have it turned down to 60 right now. I've got a pressure reducing valve that will go between 25 and 75. And I've turned it down to 60, and you can't tell the difference. So any water that I'm saving because I did that, it's just free water, essentially. So anyway, I could do a couple hours on this subject, but I would leave it the way it is. Thank you.
Councilmember Glasscock.
I just want to make a quick comment. We had talked, Mr. Ballard and I had talked, I think, in the parking lot of a post office for like 30 minutes about water.
Do that a lot.
And so I was thankful for the conversation. I can see where Councilwoman Ballard gets her love of conservation from as well. I think you make a very good point. We're all very visual learners. And the more that I think we can share and the city can share the photos of the Cheney Reservoir, the photos of the dirt around the reservoir, the more that it sinks into people. I remember seeing photos of drought restrictions in the west, and you just see the decrease of water expansion there. And so I think that's a helpful tool that the city can use because we're very visual.
I'm sorry, one other little statement. I have 5 bird baths that I have to fill up every day. And as the temperature goes up, because you have that Cheney, the surface area, the evaporation is more than we use. And that's a problem. And it's only June 18th, so anyway.
Any further comments? I see none. We'll bring it back to the bench. Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. Doug, I love you, man. I have concerns about changes to the plan. Currently, our response is well defined as far as the water levels. Regardless of what we save here in Wichita, it also doesn't affect necessarily what's going on out at Cheney. It does in some ways with the water that we pull in, but there's still a lot of issues that we need to pay attention to out there. Water is too important to just put off difficult choices for, especially if what we're talking about is saving people from going to only watering their lawns once a week. You don't have to worry about me with that one. My lawn is definitely has some deep roots there because it only sees the rainwater. So I do appreciate all the work that staff is putting in for conservation. We definitely need to talk about that more, the great things that they're doing, the great suggestions that we have. But in this, I don't think I'll be supportive of this just because we need to make these difficult decisions now because water is just so vital to everything that we do, to life itself. So I just figured I'd give my 2 cents here before we vote on this.
Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to thank the previous councils for having foresight in the aqueous beds and recharging them and have the available water, so we're not just relying on Cheney. So it's new information, it's new plan, and I think it's very responsible. And we know the levels of those aqueous beds, and the additional wells in the Arkansas River, the Arkansas River. So I think all these comes into play with a total response, and we're not talking about just Cheney. So therefore, I'll be voting for it. It gives us a lot more flexibility. Thank you.
I see no further comments from the board. I move that we take the staff recommended action.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 4-3. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Janitorial services at various city facilities.
Good morning, Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Aaron Henning with Public Works and Utilities, and the item before you is requesting your approval of staff's recommended vendors and contracts for janitorial services at various city facilities. The city has been outsourcing janitorial services for many of its satellite facilities for 30 years now. The current contracts provide services to 103 facilities that range in size and complexity from pool restrooms to the advanced learning library. Just last month, you were kind enough to approve a 1-month extension of those existing contracts to give us time to wrap up a request for proposals or RFP process for new contracts. That RFP was issued in February of this year and consisted of 105 facilities that were consolidated into 20 distinct groups. It included new facilities of the Patrol East Substation and the Wichita Waterworks Administration Building. When it was issued, more than 90 vendors registered with the city for similar services were advised of its release. 9 proposals were received, and all 9 proposers were interviewed. They were evaluated on project understanding and experience, references in past performance, pricing, and then collectively on the overall benefits to the city, given the specific requirements of each group and the need to safeguard uninterrupted services to all the facilities. Based on those considerations, staff recommends awarding contracts to 5 vendors: Air Capital Building Maintenance, Crowder's Cleaning Service, Harris Stream Clean, P&P Services, and Wilson Building Maintenance, as shown on this slide. The total cost of the services under these collective contracts is just over $1.2 million. It's about 9% higher than the cost of the expiring contracts, but that includes the 2 new facilities that I mentioned previously. There is money allocated in the current budget based on the outgoing contracts. The increases with the new contracts will be incorporated into the 2024 revised budget. And each of these contracts has a duration of 1 year and options to renew under the same terms and conditions for up to 4 additional 1-year periods. With that, staff recommends that the City Council approve the recommended vendors, approve the contracts, and authorize the necessary signatures. And I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Questions for staff, beginning with Councilmember Glasscock.
2 quick questions. When I imagine pre-COVID, post-COVID, we probably we started cleaning the facilities more, and that could just be an assumption. Did we start cleaning the facilities more after COVID than we did prior to COVID?
During COVID, there was definitely enhanced cleaning going on during COVID. I think since then, we've kind of backed off back to what we were doing before.
Okay, so we're back to stable levels. Okay.
Yes.
That was number 1. And then number 2, this is just, there's probably a reason for this, but the number just stands out to me. So on group number 1, the Advanced Learning Library is $170,000, which is, I think, the most substantial of all of them for one building. I imagine we have more cleaning there. That just seemed like an outlier compared to all the other groups and facilities.
On group number 1?
Yeah, on group number 1.
Yeah, the Advanced Learning Library is about the most complex facility that we have under these contracts. And the frequency and the scope of services there is the reason for that.
So you're not concerned with it being higher, just given the amount of...
No, sir.
Okay,
Right.
Thank you.
Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Quick question. We're adding 2 buildings, the East Substation and I forget the other one now.
The administration building.
Administration
the new
building, yeah,
treatment-
thank you.
Yes.
At some time, we'll be taking the old buildings offline.
Well, so the old Patrol East, I think, is still going to be utilized by the fire department. So depending on its usage, yes, it would be if we can, but right now the services will continue.
Just adding square footage.
Yes.
Thank you.
I see no further questions. I have one. I wanted to make an emphasis on the 43 outside restrooms that the City of Wichita maintains. Can you, again, share what that cleaning schedule kind of looks like, and that we do, as a City of Wichita, maintain at the very least 43 outside restrooms that individuals from throughout our community can utilize?
Sure. I think for the most part, those are cleaned during season. The frequency is it once a week? Once a day. Sorry, they're cleaned once a day.
I have one additional question. This is in regards to the Portland Loo. When that Portland Loo will come, will that also receive a once-a-day cleaning schedule? And where is the Portland Loo right now in the process?
It would, I'm sure it would receive once-a-day cleaning as well. I'm not sure where that is in the process. But we can certainly find out and let you know.
I think Gary knows. Gary, can you give us an update on the Portland Lou? Or Gary?
Are you, sorry, are you talking about the timing?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't even catch what Aaron said, if he said anything. We've got one of them coming relatively soon, I think, for A Price Woodard Park. I think the goal was try to have everything in this fall. Everything, I know we're still on track, but I'd have to get you a detailed update. Sorry, I don't have any more than that. We're still trying to have that in by this fall, at least the first one. There were some more challenges at NAFSCR logistically to try to make that one work for a variety of reasons, but we're hoping to have the first one in yet this fall. But I'll have to confirm and let you know for sure.
So that will be added into this configuration, because right now we have 43 outside restaurants. If this comes in the fall, then we would add 44.
Yeah. And those, one part of that Portland Lou, I'm not the expert on it, but when we talked about that and bringing that into the mix, they're supposed to need less attention for cleaning, but that's something we're going to find out because we haven't had one yet.
Thank you. I see no further questions for staff. We'll open it up for public comment. I see none. We'll bring it back to the bench. Is there a motion to approve?
Mayor, I would move to approve the recommended vendors and contracts and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Design build contract approval, Alford, Angelou, and Rockwell Libraries expansion and renovation.
Morning, Mayor and council members. Again, Gary Jansen, Public Works and Utilities. I appreciate the time you allowed me on that first item. I will make up for it on this one. The item before you this morning is a design build contract approval for renovations to the Alford, Angelou, and Rockwell branch libraries. In October of 2023, the City Council initiated ARPA allocations for each of these libraries phases as part of the library branch master plan. And at that time, the council also approved criteria for the design build contractor selection. In December of 2023, the City Council adopted a resolution for just under $4 million for the projects. An additional $2 million of citywide contributions have been committed for margin of excellence enhancements from the Library Foundation. Specific items within the capital campaign will be incorporated in the branch projects as outlined in the MOU with the foundation, which was approved by City Council in December of last year. Assuming your approval today to move forward, as design progresses and develops, there'll be consideration of whether additional improvements might be able to be made to be able to utilize some of that funding, but we won't know until we get to that point. In 2020, preliminary schematics were drafted to reflect updates to public service spaces and how programming needs are met in the library branch master plan. The COVID pandemic and lessons learned from initial library system remodels resulted in updated schematics for these particular projects in 2022. In August of last year, the City Council approved the adopted CIP, which included that nearly $4 million in funding broken out as shown. Just under $1 million for Alford, just under $500,000 for Angelou, $2.5 million for Rockwell. It is the project with the most expansion, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then there's a dedicated funding for public art for $90,000. Just to go back and talk about concepts real quick, Alford is primarily an interior remodel for collaboration spaces to better connect partners and more city services, for family engagement and early literacy enhancements, and to accommodate workforce development and digital training and technology access. Angelou improvements would also include primarily an interior remodel, along with a minimal expansion to celebrate African-American culture, addition of a reading solarium, community garden, family engagement, and early literacy enhancements, and also to accommodate workforce development, digital training, and technology access. Rockwell, as I mentioned, is the largest proposed improvement, including a 4,500 square foot expansion for family engagement and early literacy enhancements, workforce development, digital training, and technology access, a larger meeting space, pickup window, and expanded parking. In October of 2023, a request for proposals was advertised for improvements, to make these improvements to the 3 branch libraries. In December of last year, interviews were held with the 3 firms who submitted, the 3 teams. Hutton Corporation was selected to be the design build contracting firm for all projects based on the response to the criteria that again was approved by the City Council. Looking at a timeline, for Rockwell, the design will be completed in July of this year, with construction completed in March of 2025. Angelou would be complete design also in July of this year. Construction would be completed yet in 2024. And for Alford, design would be completed in August, with construction completed in March of 2025. So all the work should be done by the summer of 2025. Total amount of funds available for the design build project is that same number we looked at, just under $4 million, to be complemented with foundation directed funds. Again, we don't know exactly what those would go to yet, but as the design progresses, and at some point in time, we will bring a guaranteed maximum price amendment back to the council. If any changes have been made, we would present those to the council at that time. The amendment will include the detailed scope of design, construction, and final total cost limit for the design build contract with Hutton. Staff recommends City Council approve the contract for design build projects for the 3 branch libraries and authorize necessary signatures. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for staff? Seeing none, we'll open it up for public comment. I also see none. We'll bring it back to the bench. Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Gary. Thanks for the not only Public Works, but also Park and Rec Library for their work on this. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate seeing the $90,000 allocated for art, something that I'm really super proud that we do to make sure that our facilities are not only functional, but also, have art incorporated into all of them. So glad to see that. I am sad to say that at Rockwell, and that's where District 2 has our DAB meeting, because we don't have a library in District 2, we'll be losing the library. Excuse me, not the library, the fireplace, right? Because Rockwell is the only Santa-friendly library that we have now. So sorry to see that go, but glad for the expansion.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. No questions for me either. Just really excited to see this happen. These are some much needed improvements. I've been excited to see these come to us for quite some time, and I think each of the projects is going to make a huge difference, but for sure Rockwell's expansion will be pretty incredible in the Maya Angelou Library. Those improvements have been needed for a very long time, and seeing any types of expansions in there will be appreciated by community as well as the artwork. So I'm supportive of this, really excited about it, and appreciate all the work that's been done to get us here.
Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor. Gary, quick question for you. Sometimes typically in design builds, you have a shared cost savings. Have anything of that in place?
I don't think there are with these contracts. That is possible, especially on some of the larger projects that we've built over the years. These are relatively small in scope. And so the way this contract, I'm pretty sure, is structured, is any cost savings is to the benefit of the design build team. That's the purpose of working between now and to the point of the guaranteed maximum price. to hopefully find the place where we can all agree to. That doesn't mean things can't be changed, but if they're able to find efficiencies that we agree to, any savings are to the benefit. The other way around, they are held to build what they designed at that point for no more than that cost. So if anything costs more as they move forward, it's to the benefit of the city.
Okay, thank you. I know the contractors can find ways to save money, still get a great product out there. So maybe look at that in the future.
We will, but I think that our staff does a really good job along the way as the design progresses. We're good partners with the design build team, but we're not going to allow them to find a way to save money just for the sake of saving money if it impacts quality or anything that an asset of ours for the future. So we don't see that a lot. We've been able to do some value engineering on some big major projects. These projects generally aren't large enough to be able to find that many savings in anyway.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to remind community that this is a big investment by the city of Wichita, nearly $4 million, $3 million in just District 1 alone, and an additional nearly $1 million for District number 4. We've been very intentional, I believe, in the maintenance and expansion of library projects. As you all know, we have 6 library branches, and then the 7th one being the Advanced Learning Library. There's not even one library in District number 2, Becky Tuttle's district. So again, these are intentional investments, and I don't want that to not, I would be remiss if we don't say that, because again, this is a nearly $4 million investment into libraries alone. So we do care about the importance of these facilities and the importance of libraries and community. So again, as we are about to face tough, challenging decisions moving forward, I just want these projects to be a reminder that we do make investments into facilities and we do make investments into districts, and the return really is to hopefully have community connect, not just at libraries, but the resources that are there, whether it's printed publications or resources thanks to our wonderful library staff that help individuals connect to resources in community. I'm really grateful for that. But again, it's a mindful investment that's nearly $4 million. And so, because these reside in District 1 and District 4, if either of the council members would like to make the motion.
I'm happy to, Mayor. I move that the City Council approve the contract for design build projects at Angelou, Alford, and Rockwell branches and authorize the necessary signatures.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
CDBG Public Services and ESG Homeless Prevention Allocation Recommendations.
Good morning, Honorable Mayor and members of Council. Sally Stang with the Housing and Community Services Department for the record. The item I have for you today is the CDBG Public Service and ESG Homeless Prevention Allocation Recommendations. This really is a continuation of the Consolidated Plan and Annual Action Plan that you approved last month. So the city receives an annual allocation of CDBG, Community Development Block Grant Funds, from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We also receive emergency solutions grants. That's a specific grant designed to assist homeless programs. To receive the funds, the city is required to create a consolidated plan every 5 years and an annual action plan that details the activities to meet our goals. The consolidated planning process was broken up into 3 phases, the first of which was extensive public engagement. So during phase 1, our staff, as well as our consultant, WFN Consulting, engaged all of the DABs, conducted community needs assessments and surveys, met with the COC, the Continuum of Care Administration, held stakeholder engagement meetings, visited with the NRCs, consulted one-on-one with stakeholders, and met with both for and nonprofit developers. And then they presented to a council workshop last fall. Many of the community needs identified in phase one of that consolidated plan process had only one area in which it could be funded, and that was under CDBG Public Services. In the past, for the past 5 years under the last consolidated plan, the only areas for CDBG Public Services that went out under a request for proposals were for domestic violence shelter services and youth crime prevention and enrichment programs specifically targeted at middle school students. This year, staff had proposed a general RFP for CDBG public service funding based on the feedback we heard from stakeholders, and which opened up the process to potentially address more of the needs in our community based on that feedback. And in the past, additionally, 60% of the ESG grant had been made available through an RFP for the operations of homeless shelters. Under the ESG regulations, homeless shelter support is capped at 60% of the annual grant. However, during our stakeholder engagement, the operation of a winter shelter came out as the #1 priority. And as such, it was proposed that the first 2 years of this consolidated plan cycle, that 60% of the ESG grant be set aside specifically for winter shelter operations. So winter shelter RFP was not issued this year. The only other area in ESG that typically goes out for RFP is homeless prevention funding. So the RFP for CDBG Public Services and ESG Homeless Prevention was open from April 12th to May 3rd. The Grants Review Committee and Continuum of Care Coordinating Team or Committee reviewed the applications to make funding recommendations for a formal consideration by the council in accordance with our citizen participation plan. So we made $50,000 available in ESG homeless prevention and $475,000 in CDBG public services. Both of these numbers are actually up from the previous 5-year periods. ESG homeless prevention was around $38,000 a year previously, and only $400,000 was made available in CDBG public services in the previous 5-year period. The program was also adjusted to ease administrative burden, incorporating a $50,000 minimum contract award and a current cycle that informs 2 program years. So we'll enter into a 1-year contract with a 1-year renewal option, and that renewal will be contingent on funding availability, of course, and compliance with the contracts. The next round of funding would inform a 3-year program, and that would be done in 2026 on a 1-year contract with 2 optional renewals. That will take us through the entire 5 years of the consolidated plan. So the Grants Review Committee has the responsibility under our citizen participation plan to review those proposals and make those recommendations. And that Grants Review Committee includes 14 different representatives. 1 nomination from each of the district advisory boards, 2 representatives from the Wichita Independent Neighborhoods Association, 1 from United Way, 1 from Sedgwick County, 1 from USD 259, 1 from Wichita State University, 1 from a large business nominated by the Chamber, and 1 from a small business nominated by WEBA. A very diverse group of individuals nominated to take on this task. And it is a huge task. They are charged with reading all of those applications, interviewing or being part of the presentations of all of the programs, and then debating and making recommendations. It is a very challenging task. We had nearly $1.3 million in funding requests for only $475,000 worth of CDBG. That tells a lot. We could only award about 1/3 of what was requested. The GRC met 4 times. It's also a very time-consuming process. Each of those meetings was 2 to 3 hours long, but they met 4 times between May 16th and June 3rd, and they held a public meeting on May 22nd where all of the respondents, all of the applicants presented proposals for any public input or GRC discussion. To add another complexity to the process, the HUD regulations mandate that the local continuum of care provide input into those recommendations for ESG program funding. So in Wichita, that group which provide those recommendations for ESG is the Continuum of Care Coordinating Team. And that team met on May 17th, 2024 to prepare those recommendations and presented their findings to the Grants Review Committee at the public hearing on May 22nd. The Grants Review Committee considered all written and oral information, including the ESG recommendations from CCCT, and prepared funding recommendations during the convenings. This year's RFP and GRC processes, again, informed the first 2 program years of the consolidated plan, and those contract terms will be for 12 months. They start July 1st, 2024, so this is a pretty quick turnaround once the HUD funding becomes available to us. They are always late in getting us the funding into the program year. This chart represents the recommendations from the Grants Review Committee funding these 8 organizations. I found it interesting actually watching the debates of the review committee, because even though the RFPs were open to any eligible public service, we saw that the recommendations that came out of the Grants Review Committee still in domestic violence, youth enrichment, and homelessness, which homelessness was addressed under ESG. I thought it was quite interesting to watch. And for homeless prevention, the recommendation, Catholic Charities, this would be their first time receiving an award under homeless prevention. In the past 5 years, Center of Hope and Salvation Army were the recipients of homeless prevention funds, and neither entity actually applied this year. And so this is the first time out for Catholic Charities. So there is no impact to the general fund as a result of those funding recommendations. However, we have imposed that CDBG awards may not exceed 40% of the total program or project budget. And the ESG regulations do require a dollar-for-dollar match, which is satisfied either by funding, by cash funding, or in kind or volunteer services at the emergency winter shelter. So ESG match must be provided to an ESG funded activity. We have 2 funded activities, homeless prevention or winter shelter. So that will be the only ways in which they can provide their dollar-for-dollar match. All funding agreements will be reviewed and approved as to form by the law department. It is recommended that the City Council approve the funding allocations, approve the associated budgets, and authorize staff to make any budget adjustments, authorize the necessary funding agreements and signatures. And we have multiple persons in the audience. We have representatives from the Grants Review Committee here, if they are still here, to be honest. James and Shauna, are you still here? Nope. Oh, there he is, James, to talk about serving on the Grants Review Committee. So James, thank you so much, and thanks for waiting.
Madam Mayor, Council, I stand here representing, as she stated, the GRC, the Grants Review Committee. I represent the large business representative from Evergy. As she has stated, this was not easy work. Trying to get $475,000 amongst a host of worthy applicants. And so got quite contentious a few times, quite honestly. Most of, I shouldn't say most, but all of our GRC committee was very dedicated to the task, very passionate about certain causes, some more than others. But again, just as you know, coming together to make a decision about something that will impact this community as a whole, in the entire Wichita community, we were able to get it done. Like I said, it did take countless meetings. It did take countless reviews of the applications. What we strived to do was to, provide funding or recommended funding to those that will provide the best bang for our buck, if you will, for those, especially when it comes to preventive programs, preventive services that will help impact the city of Wichita as a whole, and then also reduce crime in our community by providing these particular programs and outreaches. Hopefully, we, through our services, are able to provide a dent in our homeless reduction as well. And so, again, we're honored to be selected to participate with this particular GRC body. Again, I want to thank those that spent the time, spent the meetings amongst this body, that were able to talk through some of our disagreements because, again, we kind of joked at the end that we were like a jury duty team sometimes. So, but again, we're grateful that we were able to get it done. And for those that were not awarded this time, we want you to know that, again, it wasn't that your request or your causes were not honorable. But again, it's a daunting task to try to provide funding that's so minimal to so many requested. So again, thank you for this time. Thank you for allowing us to present. And let's move Wichita forward.
Also with us today is Matt Lowe from the COC Coordinating Committee for their perspective from the continuum of care.
Good morning. As the lead agency for the continuum of care, I was tasked with putting together an application review panel for programs applying for funding in homeless prevention. So I recruited representatives from the Substance Abuse Center of Kansas, Salvation Army, Family Promise, the Wichita Children's Home, and ComCare and One Rise, which we felt like gave us a pretty diverse group of people to come together and review applications from 4 providers: Children First CEO Kansas, Dear Neighbor Ministries, Catholic Charities, and Yes for Christ Jesus. We reviewed each of the applications individually and then came together as a group to discuss and make our recommendations. One of the programs, Yes for Christ Jesus, was asking for funding that was outside of the scope of what would be allowed for ESG, so unfortunately they had to be ruled out. But the 3 other applicants are already doing such amazing work in our community, and there was no doubt in any of our minds that they would continue to make a great impact should they receive the funding. Unfortunately, we could only recommend one of them for the funding, so the issue ultimately came down to coverage and the ability to serve the most amount of people with the funds that were available. Dear Neighbor Ministries does tremendous work in Southeast Wichita and the Hilltop area. They made a proposal where they were looking to expand that outside of just Hilltop and cover the entire Southeast Wichita region. Unfortunately, it was limited to just the Southeast Wichita region. And we know that there are families and households in other parts of the city that also face homelessness on a regular basis. So we also looked at Children First CEO of Kansas. They do tremendous work with families or households with minor children, but again, they were limiting their reach to only those households with minor children. And we are seeing increasing numbers of seniors and other households that are facing homelessness in our community. Catholic Charities was the only one that said that they were willing and interested and committed to serving any household in the Wichita area that was facing homelessness. And so looking at them more in depth, they have the capacity, the ability to perform the services, they have the infrastructure in place and the ability to do the data reporting that is necessary for the ESG grant. So our recommendation to the Grants Review Committee was that we award the $50,000 to Catholic Charities. But again, I say that all of these programs are so tremendous, and without which, our community would be at a huge deficit if they were not actively operating in our communities. So thank you.
With that, I'll stand for any questions, and I know we do have several people who will come up and respond from the public.
Thank you, Matt, James, and Sally. We'll open it up for questions for staff first. Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. First, thank you to everybody who served on any of these committees and boards. It's a tough thing to do. It's rewarding when you see the people who receive the money, but at the same time, it's a lot like choosing your favorite child here as to who you give the money from. It's not an easy process, especially all the meetings in that short amount of time as well. So thank you guys for that. Sally, how much of this funding is going to the winter shelter?
It's about $157,000.
Okay. Do we provide any follow-up with those who have been denied? I know we can only go so far as telling them kind of the holes in their proposals or the reasons we went elsewhere, but is there follow-up that we touch base with?
They were invited to request any follow-up by email when they received the notice that they weren't funded.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor Ballard.
Thank you, Mayor. Sally, you mentioned, who were the other two that have applied in the past for emergency shelter? You said Salvation Army and...
That was for homeless prevention. It was Salvation Army and Center of Hope.
And do we know why, I mean, I think I maybe know why about Salvation Army, but do we know why they didn't apply?
No, we do not know why. I mean, I know Salvation Army is changing their model, obviously, that. I know Center of Hope has been very, very challenged in meeting the ESG requirements for the inspection and the reporting. We can only assume that that's part of what's keeping them out.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question is, typically when you apply for the money and you start receiving it, do you generally continue to get it? I guess my point is, does it not open up opportunity for new applicants? Like usually, like if, I'm just gonna say YMCA, if they got it and they started getting it every year, do they typically continue to get it? Or, I mean, I know they have to reapply and stuff, but once you kind of start, are you kind of in, or is there opportunity for new? I know there's several different new applicants, that's why I was asking.
I mean, really, it is an RFP that puts it all back on the table. But the Grants Review Committee did look at previous funding histories, and even if they were funded in the past, what were their results from that funding? So there is no guarantee if they get it, are awarded in one award period that it would come necessarily to the next. Yes, sir.
I just want to add a couple things that we also discussed during meeting is that hopefully these organizations are not basing their budgets off of these grants because there's no guarantee that you are going to get approved for these grants once the vote comes back around. And so just want to add those 2 cents to your question.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Thank you so much for that. I know there is, so many asks and only so much money. And so many of these organizations are doing really incredible work. I think the one that sticks out to me the most that is a little troubling is the Wichita Family Crisis Center, losing almost a third of what they normally get. And I know when I did my ride along with WPD, the majority of the calls involved domestic violence. So I just wanted to put that out there that I'm a little sad to see that, sad to see that they lost so much funding. And I know all of these organizations are incredibly deserving, but the domestic violence piece makes me a little bit nervous to lose funding.
I absolutely believe the Grants Review Committee saw that too as a major priority, and that, domestic violence services received almost 50% of the funding made available.
Thank you.
Councilmember Johnston.
Sally, thank you, and thank you for the great work you do. Much appreciated. I'm disappointed Center of Hope didn't apply because they do such a great job on such a slim budget with a lot of volunteers. So that's sad. I know they never have enough money each month. They run out every month to keep it in their homes. Also disappointed that Dear Neighbor Ministries didn't receive it. I'm going to relate a short story about a client we had at Guadalupe Clinic this last fall. Hope I don't get choked up telling this. But Ledy presented herself in our evening hours on a Tuesday night, and she had bruises on her body that were visible. She 4 kids, obviously abusive partner. And my staff called everyone wanting to know, where can we get her shelter with her kids? there was no place available, even as far away as Newton. And they called me, and they said, hey, JV, you know these people. Can you call? And I did. And one of them I called was Jason at Dear Neighbor Ministries. And he told me, JV, we've even got somebody in our closet, a family in our closet, just trying to protect them. So there's not enough resources for this at all. And I feel really badly about that. It's really, really sad. To finish that story, our staff took her to Via Christi St. Francis, and she had over 100 bruises on her body. She thought she had a few. So, it's a terrible situation, and I'm just sad there's not more money available. So, thanks for the work you do.
Sally, I have a few questions. I see no other questions from on the board at the current moment. You mentioned that 50% of the CDBG funding is going towards domestic violence efforts. 3 specific organizations are working with domestic violence survivors: Catholic Charities, Stepstone, and Wichita Family Crisis Center. Are those all in line with what you've given in the past when it comes to domestic violence initiatives?
All 3 of those organizations have been funded in the past 5 years, yes.
At the similar level?
They vary from year to year. Domestic violence shelter services was unique in the last 5-year period because they could actually apply under CDBG, public services, as well as ESG, because those fleeing domestic violence qualify as homeless. So they were actually able to apply under 2 different funding sources. And so the amounts that they were funded year over year could be some from ESG, some from CDBG. But yes, overall, they receive different amounts year after year.
So CDBG funding, I also saw that one provider was homeless, helping our homelessness population, United Methodist Open Door. The remaining are youth. So you have Colvin Kids Club, one-to-one youth mentoring with Big Brothers Big Sisters, PASS with Prime Fit, and then YMCA's middle school after school program. Can you share from the youth side, what were the previous awards for these grants? Any new ones? Can you share a little bit more? Because our community survey showed that community wants us to work on crime prevention and crime reduction. And I do believe that when you speak with the Wichita Police Department, youth violence is among one of those key criteria. And so youth programming is definitely critical.
Of those 4 programs recommended for funding, 3 of them consistently received funding in the last 5-year period. Prime Fit, the PASS program, this is their first year.
And then last question is more of a collaboration question. Because we have 3 domestic violence nonprofits and 4 youth programs, have we thought about collaborative efforts to try to maybe facilitate that collaboration, more specifically the youth portion? Because I look here and I see one is a City of Wichita Parks and Recreation program versus the other 3 youth programs are true nonprofit organizations in our community. How that can be more collaborative so that, again, we do have limited dollars, but if we can maximize those dollars, that would be most beneficial. I know USD 259 has their own initiative helping youth within USD 259 connect to resources. So I guess my question is, what are some collaborative efforts to try to make sure that youth-related nonprofit organizations are all working together and domestic violence organizations are working together and homelessness providers are all working together?
They have some integrated areas where they work together already. I can, obviously for homeless, all homeless providers that receive any type of federal funding are required to collaborate through the continuum of care. That is designed specifically for that task. Now, in more recent months, our domestic violence programs are now getting more integrated and collaborative with the continuum of care because they do meet that criteria of homeless, which causes them to collaborate more. But I mean, when we talk with them, they're always bouncing off of each other. Have someone, they don't have capacity, how can they connect with others? That's for sure. The youth, some of these programs do very different things, and we didn't restrict it as it had been in the past to middle school. The last 5 years, it was middle school only. Other than the Parks project, Colvin, that latchkey program really wasn't put out under the RFP. It was a set aside because of the need for that latchkey program in that neighborhood, in that Plainview neighborhood. We did pull it under the RFP this year in order to be fair and to be able to let the Grants Review Committee evaluate and to see that we didn't necessarily have overlaps in what was happening, but there's always room for improvement.
May I ask one more question? Sure. Since you mentioned that 3 of the 4 youth programs have previously received funding, one is a new program, I would like to know if anyone from any of these organizations would like to come forward and just share what they do so that community is aware of these resources. Again, our community has a lot of wonderful nonprofits and programs that really do help with services in our community, and if there's an opportunity for them to come up to the microphone, I would appreciate anyone from those organizations.
We have several here, so thank you. Reggie, you want to start?
Good morning, Mayor and Council. As Sally mentioned, we got pulled over under the RFP process this year. Kind of an overview of what we do with the Calvin Community Center with the kids program there. We do work in conjunction with the school district there. We're housed on site there at the actual campus, and we provide both before and after school program for that community. And just from our research, we know that a lot of crime prevention and things take place in that 3 to 6 time frame when parents are still working and they're unsupervised. So we're intentional about making sure that we have programming that's available to give them a safe haven, that they can be in a place where they're supervised, they're learning, and also have good mentorship there to help them with their academic challenges that may have, some of the social skills that they encounter. And we work real closely with the school district, with the police department, and some other organizations in the community as well for some collaborative efforts to make sure we're providing a positive environment for those young people. And one of the things that we do as well is we work real closely with the school district on the individual education plan, the IEPs, for those students, so that way we can make sure that there's consistency from the school day to the after-school program to help with that academic piece that they need additional support with as well. And I have Lisa here with me from our team as our program supervisor to kind of share one of our success stories that we have there as well.
Good morning, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Elisa Carty-Harrison. I'm an assistant recreation supervisor with Park and Rec, and I am the director of the Colvin Kids Club program, which was previously known as Latchkey, but since we're not USD 259 funded, we changed the name to Colvin Kids Club. And as Reggie mentioned, we work a lot with our kiddos on reading, math skills, leadership skills, and how to handle emotional behaviors as they come up, and self-regulation and whatnot. So we do a lot of journaling with our kids. We play emotional dominoes with our kids. But one of our outcomes is reading comprehension and math skills to go up, and we work with the school with that. And we had a young man who was in 2nd grade who was really struggling with reading. We did sight words and whatnot in our reading club after school. And by the end of the year, he was not only being able to read those sight words, but he read an entire book at his age group. So we know that these programs are working. We know that keeping them off the street is really important. We know keeping them engaged and helping them build those social skills and learning how to conflict manage and not be so or be able to, control themselves in a better manner. So much so that we've had the students ask our staff to go with them to their father-daughter dance, mother-daughter dances. So we know that we're making an impact, and we're super grateful for this opportunity to be at Colvin and to receive these fundings.
Hello, everyone. Madam Mayor, Council, I'm Kim Wilson. I am the co-founder of Prime Fit Youth Foundation. We are a brand new applicant, and we're super excited. I will tell you the process. I'm an avid grant writer. I've written grants through my role as Dr. Kim at Wichita State for years, and this is a daunting grant application process, and I'm sure it's because it's tied to federal dollars. But one of the greatest things, and I'll get to our program here in a minute, but I did want to reach out to the team because in my 20 years of being Dr. Kim, it was the first time that I got the opportunity to respond to questions and make revisions before it went to the grant team for review, which was really exciting because then you could address any kind of deficits or questions they had before that it actually went to the review team. So I was grateful for that process. So a little bit about Prime Fit Youth Foundation. We have been a nonprofit for 5 years. We were founded in 2019. Our charitable mission is to provide support, resources, and mentoring to marginalized youth in our community. Upon launching, we started serving 120 students in 6 schools. We have a very strong partnership with 259, and we work very closely with Dr. Polite's office, who is the Office of Equity and Diversity. And we served 120 kids in those 6 schools. Because of the outcomes that we have, because we are a very data-driven program, we were able to expand, and we are currently in 28 schools and serve over 700 kids every single day. A lot of this grew out of my time being spent in classrooms and seeing a lot of narrative around, well, this child's behavior is just attention-seeking. It's just attention-seeking. No, it's connection-seeking. These kids are starved for connection, and their behavior is a form of communication. And so our entire model is built on this notion of relationship. And so there is a mentor, and we are a culturally congruent model, so our mentors look like the kids they're serving. They're also men, which is different, and it's lacking in schools. If you're familiar with education, most of us tend to be white middle-class females. That's the education pool, right? So it's built on this relationship, and so every single day, the mentor goes to the school and provides mentoring services for the student. Because we also know that sometimes challenging behaviors are really because of task avoidance, because they're struggling academically. Our model also has academic support built in. So twice a week, another mentor, an academic mentor, comes and provides school-based mentoring related to academics, and that's done during core instructional time. We also offer once-a-week group sessions, so there's a one-on-one mentoring component, but then there's a small group mentoring component that, again, happens at the school, and that tends to help form positive peer relationships, which is also a protective factor if you're looking at reduction of crime and risky behaviors. We also offered on-call de-escalation, so if a child's behavior has escalated and the student is at risk for getting suspended or expelled and hasn't done a non-negotiable, the school can contact the mentor, and the mentor can come help de-escalate. And this is not physical, it's because of that relationship. The mentor can literally go into the same room, the student sees the mentor, and I have seen it happen. They physically decompress, take a breath, and let's take a walk, let's calm down, and we go back to class. The other thing we offer is family engagement nights, because we know that no change happens without family involvement, and so we also offer family engagement nights. We are very data-driven. Like I said, we've been in existence for 5 years. We have 6 primary outcome goals, and over the course of the 5 years that we have outcome data, the first year was COVID, over 90% of our mentees meet or exceed our outcome goals. So we have a very effective, efficient, intensive program that's really focused on connections and improving factors that impact student outcomes. So we are very grateful for the potential opportunity for this funding. It will help us expand services to serve more kids in additional schools. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Councilmember Johnston.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to thank the great work at Colvin. my CSR is Teresa Veazey, and she covers sometimes that center. And so we had our weekly meeting, and she said, "Do you want to have it virtually? I'll be down at Colvin." I said, "How about if I just come there?" And when I came there, you really get to see firsthand the need in that neighborhood. Tremendous need and tremendous work they're doing. So thank you.
I see no further questions. Oh, do we have one more? We'll open it up for public comment, and any of the providers who are still here and would like to say a few words, you may.
Good morning. My name is Amanda Myers. I'm the executive director of the Wichita Family Crisis Center. So one of the DV shelters that we're talking about today, we offer emergency shelter for domestic violence and human trafficking victims. And I just want to clarify some of the things that are happening. Oh, thank you. Some of the things, some of the conversations that we're having this morning. So there are only 2 emergency shelters, as Councilmember Johnston alluded. It's us and Catholic Charities Harbor House. We also work very closely with Stepstone, which is transitional housing. One of the issues that, first of all, I want to say thank you so much to the Grant Review Committee. I would not make it through that. I wouldn't, there's just no way. So I'm really, really grateful. I can't imagine what that process is like. And we're grateful to be recipients. I just wanted to bring some air to what this process looks like from us, from our perspective. I went back, we've been here for 115 years. So we've been doing this work for a very long time. And I went back into our records, and from what I could see, we've been receiving this funding from both CDBG and ESG for at least 15 years. This year, we took a 30% cut. And I get it. There's plenty. I don't want to, debate the value or the morality of any organization, but I want you to know what that looks like. And in fact, Councilmember Johnston's example, I couldn't give a better example of what that's going to look like for us. We don't depend on it. We're out there fundraising. We're going to do our best. And I feel bad talking about $50,000. We're talking about $50,000 with regards to our organization. Ms. Stang said that DV agencies received 50% of the CDBG allocation. What you need to know is that's a 35% decrease from what we've received in the past. We've received more or less stable funding. At least the Wichita Family Crisis Center has for 15 years. This is a 50% decrease. And I know when we're talking about, $90,000 worth of art or $170,000 to clean a library, I feel a little bit weird talking about $50,000, but that's huge for us. Our margins are very close. That means that there will be more, and I can guarantee it, women and children who will not be served. That's just the way it's going to be. And in my world, you can't appreciate art or go to the library. It's Maslow's hierarchy. If you're not alive, right? Got to keep people alive. That's sort of the way things go. So I am not here, like I said, to say that the decision that was made or the allocation that was made is inaccurate anyway. I just want everyone to understand the consequences of that. It just means more, we need to, and this is the way it is, right? I mean, this is the way funding is for nonprofits. Decisions are made, but this is gonna have a consequence for us. And I would be remiss if I didn't come here as a leader of one of these organizations who sees the kinds of things that you talk about every day, who will go back to the shelter, who's running out of the room to talk, to deal with issues of shelter, if I didn't come here on behalf of my clients and talk about that. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Vice Mayor Ballard.
Thanks, Mayor. Amanda, thanks for being here. I appreciate the few organizations that have hung in there today. You always pick the best meetings that go extra long, so apologize about that. But I just want to say I'm sorry. I know that they have really tough decisions to make, but you do incredible work, and I just want to tell you thank you, and I appreciate you being here.
No, thank you. And like I said, I understand the way these decisions are made, but I think we need to spend as much time on this conversation and the way this process is done as we do on, the newspaper versus the website, right? I think to your father's point. So that's why I'm here, so that everyone takes a deep dive into why and how these decisions are made. Thanks.
I'm about to say good morning, but I guess it's good afternoon, Madam Mayor and fellow council members. I'm Jason West, and I serve as the executive director of 2 different nonprofits here in town, Stepstone, which is one of the funded partners for CDBG, as well as Dear Neighbor Ministries that was an applicant for ESG but did not receive it. I just wanted to thank Councilmember Johnston for his story, and I wanted to share that the part of the story you didn't hear was I was in the background calling Amanda's team and calling Harbor House trying to help that survivor. And I just wanted to highlight that because it's a collaborative effort of all of our domestic violence programs working together. Our group doesn't handle emergency shelter, but we work closely with the shelters in reverse, helping survivors get where they need to go. Also, thank you to Councilmember Hoheisel for your support of Dear Neighbor and all the efforts we have in Hilltop. The other thing I wanted to highlight to Amanda's point, just some feedback, is the minimum award amount was $50,000 for this, which was higher than normal. And I think that impacted some of the funding. Our funding went up, and I'm not trying to brag or complain about that, but our award is normally less than the minimum. So I think that also helped play into what got funded and maybe what got cut. Stepstone, just so you know, is a transitional housing program. We have 34 total housing units here in Wichita, and we also provide supportive advocacy services. Those advocacy services include relationship building skills, economic and financial budgeting, as well as therapy. We have a full-time therapist on our staff. Currently, we have 31 adult survivors living in our housing and over 60 children that live in our housing and receive support on a daily basis, and then we serve hundreds more through our outreach program, which includes a protection order liaison at the Sedgwick County Courthouse who walks survivors through the protection order process. Actually, there are 4 of those advocates, one from each of the 3 domestic violence programs as well as Wichita Area Sexual Assault Center. I've got 8 support staff that work full-time for us that support survivors, including our therapist. We're just grateful to the city of Wichita. We're grateful to Harbor House and to the Wichita Family Crisis Center, who are important partners of ours. We look forward to continuing our work, collaborating with the community, and providing wraparound services. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to make one quick comment and encourage our domestic violence providers through the continuum of care. There is a bonus that's available every year for a rapid rehousing program that's specifically for domestic violence survivors. It's about $300,000 a year. So I will encourage our 2 friends here to consider applying. Hit me up after the meeting, and I'll be glad to talk to you about it.
Any further public comments? I see none. We'll bring it back to the bench. Councilmember Tuttle.
Thank you. I know this is redundant, but I do want to thank Sally and your team. You do amazing work, and I know this is hard work. And thank you for all the entities who applied. I've been a grant maker and a grant seeker in my past career, so I know that applying for any grant takes extra time and work away from the programs that you're already starting to manage. But I did want to give a special shout out to the Grant Review Committee and the Continuum of Care Coordination Team. I was on the Grant Review Committee before I was on council. And I've always said in my career as a grant maker and a grant seeker, it's harder to give away money well than to receive funds. So your efforts are not lost on me. The needs of our community are great, and this is an extremely challenging process, but just thank you for your time and commitment to our great city.
Councilmember Glasscock.
I too also served on this committee, and I think it was one of the best committees that I've had the opportunity to serve on in the city. I've seen the great work happening in our community and how we can be either supportive of it and encourage that work. And just thank you for all the applicants that came here today. In addition, I would say the committee, we have appointments to the committee, and so if there are people in the community that are interested, often I know it might be a challenge for us to find appointments because we appoint to different, I think 30 different committees and boards. And so if someone is interested in this, make sure to apply online because we're always looking for people that are interested in serving on these type of committees.
I see no further comments. I motion to approve the staff recommended action.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Public Housing, Section 18, Disposition Application for Group 3B.
Well, good afternoon again. Sally Stang with the Housing and Community Services Department for the record. This next item that I have for you is a Public Housing Section 18 Disposition Application for Group 3B. So we're going to go back a little bit. I think this is the first time we've presented one of these to this group of council. So we're going to go back in time a little bit. In 2017, the Wichita Housing Authority Board approved a rental assistance demonstration to HUD to convert its entire public housing portfolio under that pilot program. And it was broken up into two projects. It was our 4 multifamily senior projects, Greenway Manor, McLean Manor, Rosa Gregg, and Bernice Hutcherson. And then we grouped the 352 single-family homes into a separate project. We were successful in securing a tax credit investor and HUD loan and gap financing for the multifamily senior project, but we were not successful securing financing for the conversion of the 352 single-family homes. Both the tax credit investors as well as HUD themselves on a loan application said single-family housing is too expensive and too difficult to manage and maintain. So as such, we had to terminate that RAD application, and we worked with HUD. In May of 2021, HUD convened a panel of national experts to evaluate our options for those single-family homes, and they determined that the restricted RAD rents would not be able to support the amount of debt service, the amount of funds that we would need and to actually do the repairs to those homes. They recommended that we dispose of those properties and then reinvest those proceeds into new affordable housing. So we've started this process a long time ago. This is actually our 5th grouping of properties that we're moving forward for disposition. This is 61 single-family homes scattered across the city, and they vary in condition. We're recommending disposition under Section 18 of the Act, as recommended by HUD, to be sold at fair market value, either through the city's real estate office or on the MLS by contracting with a real estate broker. These properties will have no future affordability restrictions. However, we do provide a preference to owner-occupied use as well as for investors who maintain affordability in future tenancies like the voucher program. So we also request tenant protection vouchers for existing residents. So because we're disposing of some properties, HUD provides us some new vouchers to our voucher allocation to make sure that we're protecting those existing residents. And those residents are provided relocation counseling, and all of the relocation costs are paid for by the project. So there are, as we move through this grouping, we did groupings based on several different things. Pilot areas 1 and 2 had to do with the Affordable Housing Fund. The first group of 37 were wildly scattered. This group of 61 was put together. They did have some minimal environmental issues that came out through the environmental review, which pushed it further down on the application. We had Elevan radon levels only in 1 unit, and that is a vacant unit, and per the regulations, that only has to be disclosed. They're now not requiring. Previously, they were requiring us to install radon mitigation systems. Now we only have to disclose of that. And then we have 2 units that are in the 500-year floodplain. So HUD recently changed the regulations. We only had to do the review process on properties in the 100-year floodplain. Now we have to review the 500-year floodplain. So that added some additional time and consultation with HUD on those reviews. No formal mitigation is required, so there'll be no expenditure on those environmental findings. The 61 units are displayed here on this map. You'll see quite a concentration there in northeast Wichita, a few scattered throughout the other areas. AMP is just a HUD clustering, so HUD had grouped our properties in two different portfolio groups. So that's what's shown here. Typically, we would not bring this to you until we've received the authority to use grant funds on the environmental review. That environmental review is posted. It is in its public posting period. However, The HUD system used for these application is going down for 3 months, starting on July 1st, for approximately 3 months. And so we received feedback from HUD that said, go ahead and get this submitted before the system goes down on July 1st, and we can send them that authorization to use grant funds once it's received in mid-July. So this is a little bit, that's the one difference between this application and the previous ones. We didn't want to have to wait an additional 3 months to submit the application. So they did grant us that ability. So that environmental review was posted on June 14th. It takes 2 weeks through our process, another 7 to 10 days through HUD's process. We should receive it mid-July. We have completed all of the other requirements for the Section 18 application, including the appraisals, the resident consultations, resident relocation counseling, home ownership resource counseling, and local government consultations. We expect the appraised value of all 61 houses is $3,158,500. Of the properties sold to date, most of them are selling slightly 5 to 10% above appraised value, which is good. This particular group, that averages out to $52,000 per unit. The proceeds will first be used to pay off the pre-development loan from the failed RAD conversion, with the remaining to seed a Section 8 rental project as approved by the Wichita Housing Authority Board. At this point, we are projecting using them for those housing units in conjunction with our efforts around the multi-agency center. And HUD will not permit the proceeds to be used for affordable home ownership. It must be, by regulation, a public housing property or a Section 8 assisted property. There is no impact to the general fund. Again, we'll request that HUD allow the net sales proceeds to fund the Section 8 rental project in accordance with HUD Notice PIH 2020-23. The Law Department has reviewed and approved the resolution as to form, and it is recommended that the City Council approve the resolution and the submission of the inventory removal application in Section 18 disposition addendum to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for 61 single-family homes from the public housing portfolio, and authorize the necessary signatures, and I stand for any questions.
Questions for staff, beginning with Councilmember Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mayor. That's a lot to say there at the end, Sally. Now, once we sell these houses, once they're off our rolls, does that impact the area's eligibility for any of the affordable housing plans?
Not necessarily. The affordable housing funds, the RFP that's open now, are very specific to the 66 properties in those public pilot areas 1 and 2. So these won't be affected by this, but any qualifying household that potentially could purchase these could then apply for homeowner rehab or other programs that run through our office in the future. It wouldn't negate their ability to do that.
Okay, appreciate that. The relocation vouchers, do any of them help with any sort of rent payment if they can't find like a rent that's comparable to what they're paying now? You know, it might be $100 more a month. Is there
The rent calculation under the voucher program is almost identical to the public housing program. We're not seeing people having increases in their portion of the rent because of the disposition, the relocation under the voucher. So,
okay, well, that's promising. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Glasscock.
Just a quick question to try to synthesize this entire report. This moves us away from being landlords into putting things back on the market, get out of the business of homes and properties, correct?
It definitely gets us out of the public housing program, which has been underfunded by HUD for decades. It doesn't negate our ability to do something in the future, but these properties will be better served under a voucher where a landlord can get voucher rents versus what we could get under public housing or even under RAD.
Good. Thank you.
I see no further questions for staff. Thank you, Sally. We'll open it up for public comment. I see none. We'll bring it back to the bench. I have a motion to approve from Councilmember Glasscock.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Approval of travel for Mayor Wu to attend the Farnborough International Air Show in London, England, July 19th through 26th, 2024.
I move to approve the travel.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 6-0 with one abstention. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Council member appointments and comments.
Start with council member appointments, beginning with Councilmember Glasscock.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to appoint Susan Mayer Decker to the CSBG Committee for the Private Sector.
I have a list of individuals. We'll start with Sedgwick County Community Corrections Advisory Board, Christopher Haney. Wichita Airport Board, Kathy McLean. Wichita Animal Advisory, Dr. Catherine Jones and Richard Ruth. Wichita Transit, for Access Advisory Board, Craig Perbeck. For REAP, Justin Shore. And for WSU, Emily Martin. Is there a motion to approve these board appointments?
I move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. We will now have council member comments. Council member Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Just want to shout out our Park and Rec staff for the Juneteenth celebration this weekend, as well as our police department. Did a wonderful job. It was a wonderful celebration, well attended, pretty hot, but it was a really good celebration. The parade was better than it has been. It gets better every year, but Park and Recs did a wonderful job helping out, and WPD as well. And it looks like they had a good time too while they were out there.
I just have one comment, and that is an update from earlier. We asked staff for information, and that information was emailed to us. So Wichita.gov in January had 91,351 users. February, 84,825. March, 108,323. April, 128,966. And in May, 157,268. When it came to Wichita.gov/legal notices, in January, there were 34. In February, there were 34. March, 115. April, 387. And in May, 420. I see no further comments. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Madam Clerk, please open the roll. Motion passes 7-0. Meeting is adjourned. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you at Unity in the Community on Saturday.